What's up, everybody? Welcome into tonight's show of Pigskin Profits. I am Nick Sisson of N2 Media. That is Tyson McCallum of Recruit Radar PNW. How's it going, Tyson?
Pretty good, man. It feels like it's been a long time.
Oh, absolutely. So, guys, we're going to jump right into it here. We've got a special guest that's waiting in our lobby that we're going to bring in. It's the coach of the Washougal Panthers, Dave Hajak, and we're going to introduce him real quick here. Coach, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Again, I'm Nick. Thank you so much for being with us. And that's Tyson. And we like to pretend that we know something about high school football here in the state of Washington. And we're honored to have you on the show as a guest. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. I try to pretend like I know something too. So I appreciate you guys having me on, Tyson and Nick.
Yeah, well, you actually get a stipend at the end of the year that proves that you might actually know a little bit of something. Whereas, we're more or less the pro bono route, other than what we get from the community for what we do. But again, great to have you with us here. And, I guess we'll just jump right into it. I mean, for those that don't know, Coach Hajek, coach of the Washougal Panthers, and Coach, the secret's really out about your guys' team after last season, getting your first league championship since 1999, when it was the old Trico League from way back when. And you guys have got yourselves a really competitive football team, and we're just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about your team from an aspect of, we know about Holden, we know about Sam. Who are maybe some guys on your team that the rest of us aren't quite as familiar with that we should be familiar with?
Well, there's up front where it starts for any offense, and we have some great guys up front. We have senior Sam Basila, who's our center, a guy Jose Alvarez Cruz, who's a 4-year starter for us. He's a big body, plays offense and defense. Other guys, we have Will Cooper, who last year played for us as a junior, actually had a pick 6 against Highline in the playoff loss we had. Played some defense, but he'll be our running back. We have a couple kids you're going to hear about in the next 2 years. A guy named Harry DeShazer. He's a 6'5" tight end, D end. He's a junior, and he's learning things. And we have a sophomore named DeAndre Goodell, another guy who's a quick little speed back that we'll put a slot receiver. And other than that, we have a bunch of great guys who fill roles and are a big part of our team. Seniors like Prescott Leinert, Braden Padilla, Derek Slater. These are all guys who have been part of the program and are going to fill holes that help us be successful, especially we're hoping in the second half of the season once we get the playoff push.
Yeah, specifically, we were interested in kind of getting your perspective on another team in the Greater St. Helens League as well, the team that you just played last week in Woodland. And I'd say the large majority of folks might have had you guys tabbed as the favorite going into that one. But with a head coach like Sean McDonald in the league coaching alongside you, a lot of teams are going to find out that you probably shouldn't be overlooking Woodland in any capacity. Just wondering if you could walk us through how that game played out. It was very close, 33-28. And, you guys are, like you mentioned, a playoff team from last year playing against Highline, another team that's performed very well so far this season. And what can we learn from that matchup with Woodland?
Well, number one, our league has got some really good teams in it. I think that people haven't heard of yet. There's Ridgeville's always really tough. I think Mark Morris and Bay and these other schools are going to be pretty solid as well. Woodland, you're right. Sean McDonald's a great coach. He opens the game, catches us by surprise, does an onside kick. They get it. It was brilliant. And, I'm sitting there going, oh, why did we not see that coming? But it just tells you the quality of a coach he is. And they're able to, if you're at the game, some things you would notice is neither team punted. Wow. Also, there's only one turnover the entire game.
Dang.
So it kind of went, they had a perfect game plan. And, now I'm saying that other teams might want to do the same thing. Is they played keep away. They just took the ball and went chunk down the field. And, and then we had to try to play catch up. And at one point we're down by 2 touchdowns and we're able to whittle it down to 1 and then end up losing 33-28. But, they have, Sean does a great job. He has a couple really good athletes and a bunch of hard-nosed kids that play hard. He has this Elijah Anderson, the number 4, who did a great job. The quarterback had a great game. And when you take a look at it, the whole thing, they played the perfect game against us. I mean, what they did, other teams would probably love to be able to do, and that is just keep the ball away and just make us play keep up or try to play keep up the entire game. And that's what we end up doing. When we get the fourth quarter, we're just trying to match touchdowns and hopefully get a turnover or something that would help us put us over the top. We just never did.
When you have a quarterback and what the weapons that you have in the skill positions with Holden, do you ever feel like when you're coaching throughout the game that there's never going to be a moment throughout the game that you're ever truly out of it?
Well, and with Holden, it's always that way. We found that out last year against Ridgefield. Ridgefield was the league champion the year before. They were picked to win the league. We go there to play them at Ridgefield. They had, like an all-state linebacker. They just had a solid team, a number 1 receiver who was just fabulous. Anyway, we get in that game. I go for it on 4th and a foot. We don't get it with probably 4 minutes left to go in a game. The very next play, our DB picks it off and runs back for a touchdown, puts us ahead. But before that, what they did, and not to give secrets away about how to defend us, but Rice over there at Richfield, he just dropped 8 guys, and Holden literally would take his drop. I'd call a play, and there'd be nothing open, so he would roll to his right, and he'd throw the ball 40 yards downfield and find a guy in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. He did that 3 times against them, and it was a broken play. So he's a guy, that he's just going to make things happen. The first game against River Ridge, we got the ball with like 12 seconds left to go, and we're at midfield, and he goes, "What do we do? Just chuck it up?" And I said, "No, let's just run the guys off, put the back in the flat, throw them, and hopefully we'll get lucky." He rolls to his right, takes off, 60 yards later, touchdown with no time left right before half. I mean, that's just the kid. You just kind of shake your head and go, "It's not me, it's all him." He's just a tremendous athlete and a great quarterback.
Tyson, you want to jump in real quick for Coach Ajak?
Yeah. Hey, Coach. Thanks for coming on. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, I enjoy hearing those kind of sideline stories like that. I was watching I think I was watching part of that game live when he did that, took off at halftime, and just the vision he showed on that run. I mean, it's not like he's a 4.3 athlete or anything like that where he's totally running away from people. He just knows exactly where to go, it seems like, and seems like one of those guys that you could probably put him almost anywhere on the field and he'd be one of the best players out there. For generic terms, the guy you call a football player overall. But I was just curious, I have a couple questions, but the first one was, obviously you've been coaching football a while. Have you kind of tailored your offense to fit really, there's not many more dynamic connections than B and Sam, but has your system changed having those kind of guys in it?
Well, yeah, anyone's coach as long as I have, to say I'm old. We tend to do that. It doesn't matter who the coach is. You kind of have to mold your offense a little bit around the talent you have. And Holden can do anything. You're right. He could play running back. He could play receiver. His cousin, Brevin, was an all-state linebacker for us in 2019 when we got to the quarters. His cousin, Garrett Mansfield, was linebacker for us last year. I mean, the family just has a lot of athletes, plus the sisters at Idaho and the one in Wazoo. But yeah, I mean, we've every year we kind of look at what we have, and Holden could do anything. I mean, I could run wing T and he'd be the best wing T quarterback probably out there. Totally. But with what we like to do and with the other skilled guys, yeah, we just kind of mold it after what his strengths are. And he's got such a great football IQ, great athlete, that really it's opens up the offense even more. I mean, you'll see we'll go empty. We'll do what I call barbell set. We'll stack a running back over a wide receiver. We'll do all kinds of crazy stuff once in a while. We feel like we need to, knowing that if we want him to run a zone play, he'll take off and run, and he'll be good at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I mean, focusing back on that last game, like Nick said, you guys are probably favored. So at the end of the day, I don't know. What do you think your team probably took away from it more than anything that maybe you've seen since then, just in practice this week, or anything of that sort? Has the temperature kind of changed?
Yeah, I think that once in a while we're guilty of reading our own headlines and knowing that people pick us. And a lot of our guys, the whole week was like, guys, you got to be careful. Got to be careful. Woodland's a quality team, and the kids would probably tell you, we just thought we'd walk in and beat them. And
Right.
any team on any day can beat anybody. And so they had a great game. They're talented, well coached, and
Right.
don't take them serious, you lose. So we focus this week on Mark Morris, another solid team with a really good coach. Tell the kids, hey, you have to be prepared. You can't have a letdown between with Mark Morris and with Woodland. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Woodland.
Totally.
They're a good team, well coached, but whether or not we gave our best effort, that's the question.
Yeah. Well, obviously the goal every week is to win. So,
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter who the opponent is. If you don't, it is a letdown regardless. It's no slight to the other team, but no, I mean, obviously I think it's shown me this year, this league seems tougher than it was last year. And last year, like you were saying, there were some teams that, like a Ridgefield, that were picked pretty high early on. You guys have kind of taken that reign, but it seems like the league is much deeper overall. Like we've talked about Hudson's Bay a little bit, Nick and I, and he knows more about that league obviously than I do.
I just saw him last week against R.A. Long, and they're a team that can really pound it between the tackles, and they're going to go right downhill, I formation. Well coached, got a really good advising staff to go with the head coach. But yeah, absolutely, Tyson, to piggyback on that statement there. I mean, the Greater St. Helens League is probably vastly underrated in terms of having an 18 league and 4 playoff bids out of that. Just circling back to Woodland real quick. I mean, that coach, that game that you guys had against them last year, coach, to start the year. I mean, you could say from that first league game that Woodland played against you at home and lost, they were probably the most improved team from that point to the end of the season. And to see where Coach McDonald has them going, in game 1 is really a testament to, how he's got those guys to buy in. But if I heard your answer correctly in the way that I heard it, it's that Woodland did a lot of things really well against you in that game, of which that I'm not going to poo-poo the performance that Brett Martinowicz had at quarterback. That was probably easily the best performance that he's had at quarterback in his high school career as a 3-year starter for them. But maybe that there's some growing opportunities for you guys as well, more so than the great things that Woodland did to earn the victory.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you take a look at the mistakes we made, as I call it, like anything, unforced errors. Now there are some great play by them, but we had some really bad errors and that we hadn't made the previous 2 weeks. So yeah, we always talk to the kids about things we cannot do. You can't turn the ball over. You can't. Well, in the game against Woodland, we didn't turn the ball over, but we had to know the process. So if you watch the film, there are a couple times we're 2nd and 20, 3rd and 30 because of bad snaps. So we had those mistakes, and it's about cleaning those up. And we talked about all the time, but we should believe the only team that can stop us is us. And so the only way to stop us is turnovers and penalties. So that's what we talk to the kids about. And I would agree with what you say about Bay. Mark Oliveri over there, I used to coach with him at Union. He's a great coach. He's got a great staff. And to kind of add about the GSHL, or Richfield beat the WFS. How many people thought that was going to happen?
Yeah.
I mean, Richfield's solid.
I did.
West.
Yeah. At the last minute.
Yeah, about 2 hours before kickoff.
That's a good way to pick that.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's fine. I shouldn't say I was surprised, but I wouldn't have picked WF West to lose to Ridgefield the way they did.
Right.
Yeah. I think Mountain View is vastly underrated this
Yeah.
year in terms of what they're able to produce. I mean, I'm not going to say it's an anomaly on how they beat Ridgefield this season, but I think that they're going to be true league championship contenders with Kelso in their own league. So no one should thumb their nose at them losing to like Nooksack Valley. Just looking at what they did to Ridgefield and Union the last 2 weeks, that's a really high quality opponent. And I think that Ridgefield's getting a lot of respect amongst like the coaching ranks with, your brethren. The media, maybe not so much. I mean, we pay attention. I pay attention because I stream Greater St. Helens League and get a chance to see all the teams. And I know how good of a coach that Scott Rice is and how he's got his team going. They got 2 more than capable quarterbacks and, got a great inside zone run game out of the shotgun, very good disciplined defense as well. I mean, they're a tough out for just about anybody.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, Scott has done a tremendous job at Ridgefield, and they've been a power since he's been there. So, yes.
Sorry, Frog, actually coffee. So I wanted to, you mentioned headlines, right? About your guys reading headlines. Tyson and I have had a debate on text all day about rankings. We put out our own version of rankings, or I should say he does, but I disagree with him or agree with him. How much attention do you pay and your players will pay to, let's say, the RPI computer rankings, or just in general what the media thinks of you guys? Does that play into a factor of your own self-perception before you play a football game, do you think, or is it really not that big of a deal?
Well, I'm on the RPI committee, so I always look at rankings, and I know the kids are on Twitter, and if you go on Twitter, there's rankings everywhere. So it's tough to say we don't look at the rankings, but you see them everywhere. So I mean, I've seen your guys' rankings. I've seen WIA had their RPI rankings out today, and so they're out there. But you try not to bring it up or talk about it, because if you do, then the kids' egos get inflated or deflated, and it could cause some problems. So yes, try not to.
Obviously, there's a lot of teams standing in your way in terms of getting to a trophy game and for the state championship in the 2A class. Tyson and I both really kind of go back and forth on Enumclaw and Tumwater. Would you agree that those would probably be the top 2 teams that you look to face, or do you think that we're too quick to maybe brush aside Linden and possibly even that Highline team that you played last season, coached by Deontay Cooper?
Yeah, I think it's awful early for any rankings to be too serious. I haven't seen Enumclaw at all, but I know Tumwater's talented. They've always been talented, and I've seen what they've done. I think they beat Linden, right? Was it week 1 they beat Linden, or week 2?
They just beat North Kitsap. Linden lost to Ferndale in week 1. Okay. That's their only loss, I believe.
Okay, so they beat North Kitsap, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So no, they look impressive just from the scores. If you take a look at the scores, Highline's talented. I mean, we played them last year. They had athletes everywhere. They're pretty well coached, but when you take a look at it, if you line up 11 versus 11, they've got big guys up front and they have just athletic guys on the perimeter. I think it's awful early for crowning someone a champion right now, or even really discussing it too much. I won't talk to our kids about it, but I think once we get to, start like the WIA, you get to week 7, 8, 9, then you can start taking a look around. So,
absolutely. Tyson, anything else there?
No, I mean, I'm the one putting them out, and I feel the same way. It's kind of you can't really stick to any of them too much, because each week it could go. I've kind of made that a simile earlier on previous episodes, but to branch off, there's a few questions. We had Coach Cooper of Highline on, I think right before the season, when him and Rainier Beach, him and Coach Sampson dropped by. But there's a few questions I really enjoyed that I'd like to recycle with you.
Sure. Yeah.
One of them I asked them, obviously you've been a coach, and this question was one that stemmed from maybe as a kid to as an adult, but like, who were your mentors or your idols, in a sense of, maybe from when you were young to as you got older, or in the coaching ranks, however the answer comes to mind?
Well, like probably every coach out there, I mean, we have a list of people. I mean, when I was growing up, I was graduating high school in 1987. I was a Dallas Cowboy fan. I loved Tom Landry, just the way he was. He was innovative and he did a lot of things. Growing up, my coach, a guy named Gary Garland used to be the head coach of Washington School. A guy named track coach John Oyla were my guys I really looked up to. And then I played at Eastern. Dick Zorn and Jim McElwain were at Eastern. Great guys. And then when I started getting to coaching, back to Gary Garland, and then I had a mentor named Tracy Gazee, who was a head coach at Prairie for a while and defensive coordinator, who really was kind of an old school guy. And I still lean on a lot of those guys today. I talk to Gary maybe once a year, and Tracy Gazee, about at least once a week. We talk about football. So it's I tend to gravitate to the older coaches who talk about the old style football, old mentality and stuff like that. But those are guys I really looked up to.
Right on. Yeah, it's good to get a background on all that stuff. There's a lot of different answers for that question. So one of the other ones, this one was kind of fun too. Since you were a player and had a career yourself, do you have any traditions that go back a long ways, or even recent ones before a game that you tend to do over and over again?
Well, so things have changed. As I gotten older, I used to be one of those guys that I have a pack of Big Red and I chew gum.
Sure.
That one kind of went away. I had that one probably for 15 years. And then when I coached at Union, we used to always go out into the same spot to get food on the way to trips. The coaches would. Okay. The one thing I'm real superstitious. When they do the national anthem, I usually stand on the furthest guy back on the sideline, and I always, not that I'm real religious, but I used to, when I was a young guy, please God, let us win.
Sure.
Now I'm like, please God, just make everyone safe. That's all I care about.
Totally.
So, that's how things have changed for me. Traditions.
Yeah. I like that. Those are fun. Do you got any old ones, Nick, that from, I think you asked one that was along those lines. I just had it on the tip of my brain and it disappeared.
Oh, his favorite sports movie. Yeah, if there was a football movie, that's always one that I like to pick the brain of coaches and players of.
Well, I have two. I have Rudy. I was a walk-on at Eastern, so not that I was Rudy, but I love just the walk-on stories. And then probably everyone's favorite, Remember the Titans. We quote that one all the time. Remember the Titans.
Yeah, we took a poll last year, Coach, between Tyson and I, and Remember the Titans and Friday Night Lights. I think it was 1 or 2 votes separate from it, but Tyson and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum there. I'm more of the Remember the Titans guy. That was a senior year of high school type deal for me, and he's slightly younger than me, so I get why the Friday Night Lights thing is kind of more of a connection for him, because it was the same kind of ballpark there, so Coach, has anyone ever told you that you kind of got a little Pete Carroll vibe going? I sense it. I see it. If you got Big Red, you throw that in during the game and you put a camera on you at the sidelines, I guarantee that there's folks at home that are like, man, this guy's like a crooked nose away from being Pete Carroll right now.
Crooked nose too, but I'm not quite as old as Pete. So
no, don't throw him down that road there, Nick.
Oh, well, that was more of a compliment for how good Pete Carroll looks right now. Not that Coach Hayek looks old like Pete Carroll, because that's not. No, Pete Carroll's running around younger, way more athletic than most of the coaches out there right now. You're telling me that he can't beat Andy Reid in a 40? Come on now. Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I think he's good.
Yeah.
Watch him throw some good touchdown passes.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'll take that compliment.
Yeah. Coach, we'll open it up for you if you had any, give you the floor if you had any questions, comments, concerns on anything that is on your mind regarding anything in terms of your football team or in terms of us and what we do. We're just honored to have you on, and we're really happy to have a conversation with you.
Well, I like to thank you guys. I'm not a big Twitter guy. I go on there, a little bit, but I appreciate guys that are helping us sell the sport of high school football in the state of Washington. So when you have your podcast or put your rankings out, it just helps us with football as far as selling it to parents and selling it to kids, because our kids get excited about the rankings, even though we don't let them see them. They get excited. I'm on a podcast talking about Washougal. They know I'm on this podcast, or at least some of them do. My coaches do. So it kind of helps build that enthusiasm. And that's really what we want. We want our kids to have a great experience, and this becomes part of their experience, even though they're not here. That makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We gratefully appreciate, those compliments. And like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't joking. I mean, we really do just do this pro bono and really have a passion for, I played football growing up and graduated from Kelso, and, Tyson's from over in that Moses Lake area there. So it's, it's more traditional. Yeah, Anacortes alumni. They're pretty good at football, right? So it's kind of just always been ingrained in the culture. And I think Washington State really kind of doesn't get the exposure that it really deserves, from not only a national level, but even from a regional level. A lot of people like the Oregon-based schools a little bit more in the California schools. And, just seeing some of the schools that we've had go down and compete against some of those bigger California schools. For instance, Woodinville taking on that Hawaii team and shutting them out this year. Like, you're going to see some teams that the state of Washington can produce. That Graham Kapowsin win a couple years ago against the Georgia 7A champions on ESPN and really kind of made them look, not even up to par with what they were capable of doing there. So
we love Bishop.
Yeah. And Bishop Sycamore. I mean, they're obviously not Graham Kapowsin anytime soon, but so Coach, I'll be at Longview Memorial coming up on Friday. And I got a link set up on my YouTube channel and Facebook page right now for the game. If you want to share that with any of the families and stuff from down in the Washougal area, I promise to say nothing but good things about you during the game on Friday. And Mark Morris will be a game opponent, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that matchup plays out. And one thing I am curious about your team and how you approach it seeing in person this year versus last year is that last year you had a really good running back with Liam Atkin, and what you've been able to evolve with him departing and to complementing DeShazier and B and Evers, along the way. I think even there's John Costa, if I remember correctly, and Mather Minnis from last year. So, I mean, I'm really excited to see kind of what the other complementary pieces look like that you spoke about as we started the show tonight. So I'll come down and say hi to you before the game and go over your starters and everything. And then you can give me all the criticism after we talk really nicely about you after this. So no, but seriously though, we really do appreciate you. And we really have nothing but good things to say. And, we have big expectations for Washougal and your school this year. And we look forward to, seeing you guys hopefully make it back to the playoffs and take on a good quality team from the EVCO and go from there.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And if you need anything else from me, just let me know, and you guys, I'll get it for you.
Just give me a script of your first 10 plays so it's easy for me to know what to expect. I'm just teasing, of course. So
when you got a quarterback like that, your script probably is improvised a little, I imagine.
Yeah, B drops back.
I was joking with him today because he would call the plays before I would during practice. And I just told him, I said, I don't even have to show up anymore, right? So,
anyway, it's a good weapon to have for sure. Yeah, appreciate your time, Coach. Pleasure to get to virtually meet you.
Yeah. You guys have a wonderful night, and thank you.
Thank you, Coach. We appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. So, Coach Hajek of Washougal High School, I'm telling you, his energy, and he's got good hair, good style, Yeah. It just like bled like Pete Carroll to me. Like I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, this is like he's got the energy, And then he said Big Red, I was sold. As soon as it was about gum chomping, I'm like, yes, I'm all in on this now. I was like, I'm gonna say it. So
that's funny.
But yeah, that's a good way to start the show. Again, hello everybody. That was Coach Dave Hajek of Washougal High School, 2A from Washougal, I guess Washington, kind of like right by the Vancouver Camas area, known for dirt tracks and motocross. but also known for football recently, with Holden B and Sam Evers and those folks. And as Coach mentioned, DeShazier, good looking prospect. Tyson, he's a big guy, and like Coach mentioned, 6'5", almost 250, and kind of athletic. If I remember correctly, he caught their first touchdown of the season this year against River Ridge, the 3A school that they played in week 1. Excuse me. But yeah, overall, I couldn't be happier with, having Coach Hajek on here tonight. And I imagine that he probably would have, liked to have talked about a victory over Woodlands in last week's game. But ultimately, one loss doesn't doom you. This isn't college football, to where one loss takes you out of, going to where you want to go. More or less, it just kind of refocuses you and gives you something to think about the next time that you might meet an opponent that plays a similar style as the one that just, handed you a defeat there. So I'm very appreciative of him coming on and sharing how that game played out and, ultimately what they took away from it. And I'm also glad to get his perspective on the rankings, and knowing that he's on the RPI staff. Now we know who we can text and, send a message to as to how bonkers they can be sometimes, like we're looking at the rankings earlier today. It's just like I think it was, if I remember on Twitter, it was Josh Kirschenbaum. He's the editor now at the Chronicle in like EVCO territory. And I think that he pointed out that the rankings are so bad that and so laughable that Chief Lashai is ranked in 2B and they're an 8-man team. So it's like it just goes to show you. It's like, it's like throwing darts blind, man, like on some of these ones. I'm not trying to kill it, obviously it's like, but they put that out with a fire emoji, and it's like the only thing that they had missing there was like a dumpster next to it.
Set it on fire. It's more like
right.
Yeah.
Like and I'm not here to like poo-poo what like the RPI system like really values and thinks about at this stage. But I will say this, Tyson, and I'm not going to be all negative about it. What it does do right now in the beginning part of the season is it does put perspective on teams that you otherwise wouldn't even think about. Like you wouldn't think about like Rogers, for instance, as being a potential, top 5 team.
Right.
You might not think of Moses Lake being number 2. Maybe you do, but there's different, I guess, layers to it. RPI rankings are like onions to me in terms of like you have to continuously peel them back to get to where ultimately they're going to end up. More times than not, I'll say this. When it comes to RPI rankings in like basketball, for instance, by the time that you get to that selection committee, most of the spots are pretty accurate in where teams are going to end up when it comes to seeding. Football, not so much, because bids are going to be a little bit more complicated, especially this year when you've got 3 teams in your top 5 in 2A, for instance, that come from the Northwest Conference, and one of them isn't even going to show up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, it was the goofiest thing I saw besides that Lashai deal was they had, and not to knock any team in particular, but for instance, they had Fife listed in the top 10, and Fife lost to Ording 28-14. Ording's 3-0, Fife's 2-1. It's like, so in what equation? I'm trying to figure this out about a couple other sets of rankings too. In what equation does a team that beats this other team not be ranked? Even like, for example, and I'm guilty of it in my own rankings. I still have Washougal higher than Woodland. Does that make sense? Logically, probably no. And others do it too. So, I get where there can be a few flaws this early in the year.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, shame on you for doing that. I mean, you can't make the argument that Moses Lake beat this team and this team beat this team if ultimately you've got them ranked below. But I get what you're saying. It's all subjective, I mean, in terms of if the game's played another time, would it play out the same way? Is this team truly better than this team?
Right.
Remains to be seen. I don't know. All I do know is that we're going to be upsetting our Lake Stevens stands, who think that they're the number one team in the world. So I mean, I noticed that you still have them at number 2 in your rankings. We'll go over that in just a little bit, but they weren't to be found on the RPI rankings in the number 1 spot there in 4A. So
we're not target number 1 anymore.
I think Graham Kapowson though was like vastly disrespected. They were down in like the 10th rank spot, I think.
10th,
for the RPI. I mean, we can dive into it a little bit, but again, for all you who don't know, which you do, or at least you better, I am Nick Sisson of N2 Media. That is Tyson McCallum, Recruit Radar Pacific Northwest on X, or Twitter, as we still call it. And, just joined by Coach Dave Hayjack of Washougal High School. Typically, when we start the show, we like to go over how we did last week, as we pick 20 games each week, and we like to measure ourselves against each other. Our third host of the show, Devin Record, is not available tonight, but Devin has been doing a solid job of, cycling through highlights and also providing us his game picks, of which we've been keeping track of. And Tyson, I think you probably have the standings thus far. How did we do last week, and where do we sit currently?
Let me tell you here. So, speaking of which, we need to get Devin's input we do have his input, but I need to put it into the spreadsheet. So, week 3 records. Nick, you were first place at 15-5. I was at 14-6, and Devin is at 12-8. So on the year, that leaves Devin in third at 36-24. You are in second at 42-18, and I am on top 44-16 throughout 3 weeks.
That's not bad. 44-16. That's through 3 weeks. That's a pretty good clip.
Yeah, I mean, you're 22 games above 500 too. So it's way better. I'm better at picking these games than I am the NFL ones. I've been going like 500 in this pool.
Yeah. It's too bad the Emerald Queen Casino doesn't sanction high school sports betting.
Hey,
just saying.
Yeah, could really make some money there. Have some big controversy at the same time.
So let's talk a little bit more real quick about last week, and then let's go ahead and kind of make some comments on the games. And when I mean real quick, I actually do mean real quick this time. We're going to try to keep the show kind of a little bit shorter in range to kind of maximize, our time as well and your time. It's kind of difficult to ask people to sit and fast forward through a 3.5-hour podcast each week. But, like we always say to one another, we just scratch the surface. We can sit here and talk all day, all night about it and such. But I'm just going to zip off the games from last week. Bothell and Skyview. Skyview ends up winning that one over Bothell, and, not really much of a surprise there for me. Tyson, we both had Skyview in that one, correct, I think. And, the game right below it, Emerald Ridge and Sumner, that one looked like it was upset early with Sumner jumping out to the lead, but Emerald Ridge ends up coming back and getting the victory. Excuse me. Sticking in the Kingco, Mount Si, North Creek, and Mount Si picks up another victory. Their defense looked pretty solid in that one, only allowing 10 points to the Jaguars, 24-10 in that one. And then Woodinville ends up taking care of Issaquah. I believe that one was 35-14. The RPI rankings, they love Woodinville, by the way. And then our 3A game of the week that we had last week was Garfield and Seattle Prep. And, that was a really, really good game for, basically the entire way through. And Garfield ends up coming away with a victory, I believe 28-19. So, Prep showed that they're able to compete with, one of the, really good teams in a really good league. So I think that, you got to take Prep pretty seriously throughout the rest of the campaign, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where they end up. We'll stop there. That's the first 5. You got any thoughts on those first 5 games at all?
No, they all turned out like we both thought they would. We all picked the winners in those. I watched some of that Bothell and Skyview game. There was a stream on it, and shoot, it was Bothell right around halftime, Bothell jumped out to the 7-0 lead, and then Skyview came out of the second half and just took command. But that Sumner Emerald Ridge game, I believe that was like a 3-point game in maybe the second quarter, but Skokel tore it up through the air. None of the others, well, actually, Garfield and Seattle Prep definitely did surprise me because that game was 20-19, pretty at least halfway through the fourth quarter. So definitely put Seattle Prep on the map, and they get another solid test in no day this week. So I think it'll be a tougher game than we probably would have thought of 3 weeks ago.
Well, speaking of a tougher game than we would have thought, last week, I went with Spanaway Lake in the matchup against Mount Tahoma, and we were kind of sensing that Mount Tahoma was better than their 0-2 record suggested. I mean, they played a couple of really good teams to start the season and hung with them, and Darian Clemens of Spanaway Lake was, I won't say like completely held in check, but held down for the most part. Tahoma ends up winning at 26-14. I think that's a pretty big win for Mount Tahoma in that capacity, and a good way for them to start the league schedule. And if you really look at how the league is played out right now, Tyson, Mount Tahoma's like going to be right there throughout the entire season. It's going to be interesting how it all comes out, especially with how things kind of shook down with that Lincoln and Camas game that kind of put a damper on the weekend, as well as another game. But
yeah, no, definitely.
That was a game that I wasn't like totally shocked, but I was a little bit surprised there. So Mount Tahoma, there's actually Tahoma and Mount Tahoma, so got to learn the difference, folks. But yeah, Mount Tahoma looks to be a real player in that league with Lakes, and I believe Stadium also is off to a 3-0 start there. And
yep.
I mean, this has been a year where you haven't been able to see some of these teams coming, at least from an outsider's perspective.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just, I think last few years, especially all the way through Johnson, it was pretty much like, you could write that one in Sharpie that it's going to be Lincoln. But it's like a 4 or 5 horse race this year.
Yeah, let's go to another game real quick. Mount Lake Terrace and Shorewood. That's one that we had last week, and I ended up going with Mount Lake Terrace, and it was 35-0 in favor of them. And good win ultimately. I think that they're going to be a team that is going to need to get a little bit more of a test, down the road to see ultimately how they're going to stack up against the big boys in 3A.
Yeah, it was Xavion Jones 28-0. That was I think he had like, not to jump to players, but in that game he had 2 60+ yard touchdown runs and another one that I think was 50 yards, and ultimately ran for 260. I got it written down, so we'll get the more exact number later. But if you got a running back like that makes you a good threat to give a lot of teams a run. But like you said, they're yet to truly be tested. So it's one of those 3-0s, like a Stadium or like a Rogers, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like interesting. But the next 3 weeks for a lot of these teams is going to tell a lot.
Well, I mean, it always changes when you start to become the hunted. You're not sneaking up on anybody anymore. Your best plays have been put on film, and all the good coaches and the good teams are ready to figure out a way to expose whatever weaknesses they think that they can find. Plus, it should be noted here that Septembers over the last few years now have really been long extensions of summer with really nice weather. Outside of that game that you were at with Moses Lake and Kamaikan, and it really wasn't bad weather. It was just thunder and lightning. I mean, that's common over in central eastern Washington in the summertime. So but there hasn't been any real like rain and precipitation during any of these games, and that's really as we talked about last season, that's really when things start to change. That's when everything shifts. And how well is your running game? How good is your defense in the trenches? How good is your leg strength? Because the footing is not going to be great. So these are all factors that no team has really dealt with yet, and it's always going to be telling to see, which teams can win a quote fist fight. I'm using that term lightly, especially considering what happened in the fishbowl. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, speaking of 35-0 and teams that can run the ball, to segue into the next one, a game that you guys both picked Seaholm. It was Seaholm and Cedro, and Seaholm travels to Cedro, and Cedro throws the ball 4 times and whoops up on a Seaholm team that a lot of people, thought was a big-time threat. But that was a matchup that didn't happen last year, so it's interesting to see that was the result of that game.
Well, the only reason it didn't happen was because of an alleged incident with Seaholm that forced them to forfeit the game, and the team wouldn't be able to be fielded, and having potentially seen that matchup last year might have helped me in my assertion of how the matchup might go. To be honest with you, I was really enamored with Seaholm's quarterback, Nolan Wright, being able to come up with big plays to kind of match Karsten Reynolds. But I think ultimately that we've talked a little bit about Cedro and how far they could potentially go. And at the beginning of the year, I even went as far as to suggest that Anacortes and Cedro would be the 2 teams that come out of the Northwest Conference, and that Linden would not even make the postseason. I probably will not get a Christmas card mailed from the Linden football team this year, but if you really look at how good Cedro Woolley is, and we'll segue into that later, but they look like a major problem. And, it may come down, honestly, that last spot, it may come down to Linden and Anacortes at the end of the year.
Yeah. Well, even this weekend too, with that Cedro and Linden matchup, that's
you spoiled it, man.
I know. Well, hey, we'll get to, we'll get to the picks later,
Jesus.
but it's relevant for what you're talking about. And, Cedro Woolley's a team that last year, Tumwater, I think, is a different team than they are this year. But I watched that game last year in the playoffs, and it was probably similar to this Seaholm Cedro Woolley game. Tumwater couldn't move the ball at all, and Cedro ran it right down their throats. And the one thing that's more dangerous about that team this year, they've shown in the first couple of weeks that they can and will throw the ball more than just the 4 times that they did against Seaholm. But I think it was either week 1 or week 2, Reynolds was like 15-18 for $180 and like 2 or 3 touchdowns through the air. So for considering he's a lefty, he's like, they've got that Tim Tebow offense rocking where he's carrying the ball for 100+ yards every week and may throw it or may not, for that matter. So, yeah, that league's going to be very interesting. But some of the cream just rose to the top after this last week, for sure.
Well, Seaholm's not out of it, but a game like that can really throw a wrench into your confidence level. And but like I said, they still got winnable games. They gave Anacortes a lot of problems last year. I saw it too. They gave Anacortes a lot of problems. They also gave Linden some problems in that matchup. That was a really close physical game. Ultimately, if you look at how Cedro, just look at this way. All right, we'll move on after this real quick here. But what Cedro did last year in the playoffs was sneaky to the term that I don't think people really saw it coming. But when they beat Tumwater the way that they did, even though it ended up being an 8-point game at 30-22, like they controlled that game. And then if you look and see how good Tumwater is this season and where they're at, they're arguably number 1 team. But if you go back to that, and if I remember correctly, Cedro returned, I think, 16 total starters out of 22. And just look at the potential for that. Like when you see how they played against a team that is performing like Tumwater is right now, I think that they have a legit case to potentially being the number 1 team.
Oh, for sure. No, that's they can do pretty much anything they want to, and they're a physical bunch because I think there's a lot of thought around Seaholm being a pretty physical bunch, but if you come out and beat a team 35-0, you are beating them at every single phase of the game. So
Yeah, you're not lucky. You're not.
No.
You're not just getting by.
Right.
You're not. You're not masking inefficiencies.
Totally. I don't even think Seaholm had 100 yards in that game, or it was just over 100 yards maybe. But I want to say they held Seaholm to like 20 yards rushing, and I think Wright just eclipsed 100 yards passing. But a couple turnovers, and one of them was by Mr. Quarterback himself. That was a statement win. There was a lot of them this week, though, that were statement wins. That's for sure, especially in 2A.
Yeah, there were a lot of teams that kind of put their foot down for sure. Here's a team that kind of enters the fray. Bremerton, they ended up winning a shootout with Olympic 37-36. Great game. And I ended up having Olympic in that one, and Olympic was pretty much respected in the rankings that came out for RPI and WIAA. So, I mean, if you look at where Bremerton and Olympic are playing in the same league with North Kitsap, I mean, you gotta imagine that Bremerton is going to be one of those teams that has a real chance of competing for a playoff spot this year, and that's a good win for them. Going a little bit further back to the Northwest Conference, Anacortes 45, Archbishop nothing. I mean, we both saw Anacortes win in that game. I don't think we both saw it as 45-0, but that's a great win for the Seahawks to kind of get their legs underneath of them, and their defense really showed out and did a great job.
Another one where literally just beat them in every phase. I mean, interceptions, punt block. Anacortes spread the ball around to everybody pretty much. It was kind of a get on track win for them. I think looking ahead, they're Squalicum might be a undermatched opponent overall, but the rest of their schedule is going to get progressively harder. That's for sure. So good time to get right.
Yeah, Enumclaw continues to look pretty good, 42-0 over Stillicum. And then Fife, again, another team that's getting a lot of love. They win 42-13, so the Trojans are off to a good start, taking out Clover Park. And then the 1A game of the week, Tyson. We picked some pretty good games for games of the week, I would say, last week overall. And Nooksack Valley and Kings, I mean, they went right down to the wire, and you got to give Kings all the credit in the world to survive in that one at home. And they become a real player in 1A, especially in the rankings, of course. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but what a big win for the Knights of Kings.
Oh, for sure. I mean, a team that, everyone kind of circled Nooksack and Royal as a toss-up in terms of being in the league of their own in 1A, but Kings showed that, they've got plenty of good guys on their side of the football. They loaded with 3 running backs and a quarterback that's played. And frankly, they might have a weapon a lot of the other teams don't. A guy that made the 20, it was only 23 yards, but still made the field goal to take the lead and ultimately win that game. So you have something like that you can rely on late in games, especially at the 1A level. That makes you that's as big of a threat as any other position on the field. Besides quarterback. But kickers are rare, so.
Yeah, I don't know what else that Kings is going to really have to do throughout this season to potentially enter the postseason with a perfect record. I mean, that's a huge win for them. And, I mean, the good news is for Nooksack is that it's a non-league game, and it gives them an opportunity to see an opponent that they might have a chance to – I say have a chance because it's going to be super tough to make the playoffs out of the 1A Northwest Conference this year because, I mean, Linden Christian's not like, going away or anything like that. They got a test of their own coming up this week that, if they can pick up a win in that one, I mean, we're going to start that conversation again in terms of, Nooksack and Linden Christian, which one is going to be on the outside looking in. We're going to have one really good team that's, not competing. But for right now, the Knights are safe, and they look to have a pretty manageable schedule and a very winnable league. And I see no reason as to why they're not going to end up being 9-0 entering the playoffs and potentially looking at a number 1 seed, if Royal maybe stumbles along the way. If Royal ends up winning out, they're definitely the clear number 1.
Yeah, for sure. King still has some good testers left, but I mean, Nooksack's as big of a test as you can get, and they hung on.
Right. Well, I mean, just look at how Nooksack's, scheduled and played so far this year, playing Mountain View, and Mountain View's look pretty good in those games that don't involve Nooksack Valley. So I mean,
yeah,
you gotta
it's
give
a testament to 1A.
Yeah, you got to give them a lot of credit. So, let's skip down real quick to our 2B game of the week last week, and we both went real heavy on this one, back and forth. And it's Northwest Christian of Colbert, 31-12 over Riverview. It wasn't as close as we kind of built it up to be. Northwest Christian really did a great job. McLaughlin, my boy, that I scouted last week on film, had a great game, and ultimately, I think that they're a team that's under the radar in 2B. If you mix them in to the blender with I'd say Toledo and probably that Lind Ritzville Sprague team, although they got a super good weapon, I think that they're one of those teams that has a realistic shot of getting to that, let's say, semifinal round, and maybe having a crack at a Napavine or a Okanagan.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, the teams they beat this year. I mean, we don't know everything about Riverview and say Reardon, but compared to some of the opponents that those teams have beat and or played, I'd say they, I've got them sitting at 5. So it'd be interesting to see. But a couple special teams touchdowns in that game. You mentioned, was it McLaughlin? You said McLaughlin?
McLaughlin, yep.
Yeah, McLaughlin, and then they had another kick, back-to-back returns that went for a touchdown. Ultimately, that was really the fundamental difference in the game, but it looked like a team that has ability to make big plays.
Special teams. That's what makes them special, bro.
Yeah, for sure.
Raymond South Bend and Ilwaco, I ultimately went with Raymond South Bend in that one, and it turned out to be the correct choice, 41-14. And I was, again, having a little bit of problems with that because I've seen Ilwaco do some really good things on film so far. I just felt like that the level of competition probably wasn't quite up to snuff with where Raymond South Bend is at right now. I mean, if you look at RSB, with a guy like Farrell Johnson carving up defenses the way that he's doing, they're a real threat. Even though they lost that early game against Toledo, when it gets to that point in the season where, the weather's not so great and running the ball is everything, a guy like Farrell Johnson can take Raymond South Bend a long way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think he said over a couple hundred yards the last 2 weeks. And that Toledo game, you mentioned them losing. That was a shootout, 42-35 of a team that's equally as good. So, they're a team that, might have a loss or two along the way. But like you said, when weather gets rough, they're going to be a tough out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. When the field is soggy, Toledo is no joke either. They got Ethan Carter running back. I mean, they've got plenty of legs as well. I mean, running the football is going to be everything coming November, end of October, first week in November. And I like where Raymond South Bend is at right now with Farrell Johnson, and seeing him on film and the numbers that he's putting up. Good team in Raymond South Bend, and I think that they're a tough matchup for a lot of those little teams where we've got Raymond South Bend ranked at, or where you have them ranked at, I should say. I think it's 7th or 8th or so in your 2B rankings.
Right now they are at 6. Last week they were at 7. The week before they were at 8. So they're climbing up there for sure, right behind Northwest Christian, who we just talked about, and Toledo. And
let's wrap up the games from last week. We got our non-league interclassification games here. Ferndale takes apart Glacier Peak 22-16. That's a huge win again for Ferndale, and they continue to just stack up wins in this one against the 4A opponents. Then you got Camas and Lincoln. Again, this one kind of somber. Camas ends up getting the win 21-7, but the game had to be called early due to a pretty serious injury. And, we all hope that it's quarterback for Lincoln, right? Who ended up getting hurt in that one.
Oh, was it really? I never caught who the player was, to be honest, in that game. I remember seeing it on Friday, and I haven't seen any updates really since.
I just believe that was, if someone has the direct knowledge and wants to type it into the live stream comment section, that would be great. But I thought that what I was seeing was that it was the quarterback that was injured in the game, and they ended up having to call the game, due to the injury. So, I mean, to transition back to the actual result in the game itself, I mean, I think Camas is a very solid team, and they're going to be a team in 4A that is going to be very difficult. I don't know what to make of where Lincoln's going to go based on the injury, but I think it's one of those things where anytime something like this happens, Tyson, you always look for a team to rally around each other and figure out a way to bond and do what they can to stay competitive and next guy up mentality. Lincoln's a good program and they got a lot of athletes. I'm sure that they're going to end up being okay, but ultimately Camas ends up walking away with the 2-touchdown victory in Camas. And then Mountain View doubles up Union 42-21. I went with Union in that one. Again, not good. Mountain View ends up, making that one look easy. Tumwater definitely made it look easy over my Kelso Highlanders, 54-0. I mean, no secret, I went with Tumwater on that one, but it's still, Tumwater looks really good, man. I mean, Kelso's like not going to be one of those teams in 3A that's going to do more than possibly win their league, maybe win a first round matchup and a crossover. But ultimately, Tumwater's going to be playing for, a few extra weeks at the end of the season. And they look, barring some, football happens, but barring something crazy happening, they're a very, very solid team. And then the last game that we picked was La Center and Kalama, and I went with La Center 17-6. This is closer. And, the news is that quarterback from Kalama, Aiden Brown, not 100% healthy right now and trying to work his way back to being as such. And if they're at this point right now in the season at 1-2 with the competition that they've played and he's not feeling 100%, look out. I mean, Kalama's like not going to creep up on anybody. That's why you've got him at 7 still in the 2B rankings at 1-2. It's not quite like the Bellevue effect 1-2, but they're definitely a team that when playing 100% and playing 2B competition, they're going to be borderline top 5.
Yeah, the other loss was Woodland, a team that we just talked about in depth to start the show. So, yeah, their team, like you said, as long as they get in, they've got plenty of talent to meet Napavine in the state tournament again if that's how everything lined up.
Well, that's all the games from last week. Yes, Smyrna, Camas did defeat Glacier Peak by 5 touchdowns on the road at Glacier Peak. I know you're keeping an eye on them because Lake Stevens plays in the same league as they do, but I wouldn't be overly concerned. But yeah, James mentioned in the live stream chat that if Lake Stevens beats West Lynn, that we have no choice but to put Lake Stevens number 1. Well, James, I got great news for you. I agree. West Lynn is probably the second, if not the best team in Oregon 6A, them in Central Catholic. So, yeah, absolutely. If Lake Stevens beats them, I mean, but I will say this, right? I want to remind everybody, and I'm going to continue to stoke the fire. That does not mean automatically that they're like better than Graham Kapowson. That does not mean that. It just means that I would agree, they would deserve to be ranked number 1. But in a setting where they're going to play an actual game, I know, they beat them last year by 2 touchdowns. I don't disagree with that. But this season is a little bit different in terms of how Graham Kapowson is made up. but I'm not going to doubt Lake Stevens if they beat West Lynn. If they beat West Lynn, I would probably pick them in every single game that they play from here on out.
Yeah, and it won't change my mind if they lose to them either, because they're not favored. I wouldn't think if there was a line on the game, they wouldn't be favored to win it, but it's not one that affects them if they don't win it by any means. Has no repercussions as to their impact on the state, where the polls will see them. That's something we mentioned a little bit a couple of weeks ago. We try to typically leave those games off of our picks because 9 times out of 10, the out-of-state team is the one that's favored. And whether or not the Washington team wins, the best thing that it really does is put our state on the map for having better quality football than it may get credit for.
Federal Way and Lake Stevens 63-13 last week. That's an impressive amount of points for anybody at any classification. And Federal Way is not like abysmal. So, I very much think that Lake Stevens is very, very, very good. That's why they're in the top 2. I mean, you're not in the 2 because you're not good, or because you're not beating teams handedly, so.
They beat Federal Way last year 63-21 too. Last year's West Lynn game was 45-6, so that will be an interesting one. So if they even make a game out of it, let's be honest, that's a testament to the quality that they are. I think West Lynn's put a quarterback into the D1 school like the last 5 years.
They're okay.
Lake Stevens has their own that probably should end up being a D1 quarterback.
You know why West Lynn is good, right?
Why is that?
Well, because their mascot is the Lions, and they wear green and gold.
Oh, that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. It's
yeah.
It's like, and look at Tumwater, green and gold.
Mm-hmm. I can't say
like
that works.
It's written in stone. You can't say that about the Oregon Ducks, but I mean, you can say that about
Quincy.
the high school team. Yeah, well,
yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a winning combination, or the Oakland A's for that matter.
So while we're in an in-between spot before we start talking some rankings, like any games that we didn't pick last week that we should mention in terms of results. Or are we pretty good on that?
Let me pull up my top 10. Gosh. In 2B, Goldendale went on the road and beat the Dows 34-14. I know nothing about the Dows, but that was a pretty considerable difference there.
Royal just continues to just absolutely
dominate. Yep, dominated Zilla. Riverside beating Colville. That was one that was very sound win, 31-7. And Riverside, mind you, that's the team that week 1 didn't have. I think what was it, 17 kids that weren't allowed to suit up per WIAA originally.
Didn't they reverse that at the last minute?
They did. They caved to all the pressure. Second year in a row that the communities jumped on some issue. Last year it was that suspension, I think, for TJ Crandall from Skyline, where they accused him of punching a kid and etc. And he didn't. And it was on film, and everybody went all up in arms about it. And they did the same thing for this instance, but. Yeah, anyways, they're 2-1, and Colville had beat some decent teams to start the year. North Central and I have it on here. It was I always try to remember off the top of my never been a good note taker, so I forget to refer to my own notes. But beat that Tenino. Obviously, it's a down year for Tenino, but that was a pretty interesting win as far as. I had Colville slotted at number 10 after the first 2 weeks, and Riverside handled that one pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, other teams like Woodland winning that game. I know we talked at length with Coach Hajek of Washougal, but it's a big win for the Beavers. And I told y'all that Woodland was sneaky before the season started, and they were going to be one of those teams that's just going to maybe, get in there and F some shit up. It's just, it's kind of crazy to think that it's only year 2 for Sean McDonald and a guy that's won, back-to-back state championships for Kalama before he went to, coach at Woodland. And so, I mean, that's a big stepping stone win for Woodland, and it really gets all the guys in the program fired up, about what the future can hold. And I think that they're very much going to be one of those real contenders. And if they end up winning they're in the driver's seat right now. Their biggest obstacle right now going forward is the last game on their schedule, where they're going to play Ridgefield, I believe, on the road at Ridgefield. And if you think about it, Tyson, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there's a 3-way tie for first in Greater St. Helens League. If Ridgefield ends up winning that game and Washougal beats Ridgefield at Washougal, you got yourself a 3-way tie for first at 6-1.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's like I mentioned earlier. Last year people thought it would be a pretty deep league, but it looks even deeper this season.
Well, I mean, I agree with Coach Hajek about there being teams that are undervalued and underrated. I do think though that once you get to that 6th, 7th, and 8th spot, there's a clear drop off, right?
Sure.
Once you get to about Hudson's Bay and Mark Morris, that's about where the major competition in the league is probably going to stop. And that's not to say that there isn't a team that can maybe pull off an upset against one of those middle tier teams, but I don't see a Washougal getting knocked off by Columbia River. I don't see him getting knocked off by Hawkinson. I don't see him getting knocked off by Ari Long. Sorry guys. But yeah, it's just it's a league that where there will be a battle for that final 4th spot to cross over and get the right to possibly play Tumwater in the first round, which is going to absolutely suck for somebody. But hey, last year it was Woodland, and Woodland is better off for having played that matchup.
Yeah, for sure. No, the other game I noticed that we probably should have had on our picks. I guess we just overlooked it, but Skyline and Eastlake. Both were off to 2-0 starts. Not a touchdown scored in this game. It's 9-6.
Defense.
Yeah. I think both teams are probably better than everybody thought they'd be at the start of the year. It'll be interesting to see how that schedule keeps playing out, and that's another league. Yeah, it's another league that's going to be there's almost 4 or 5 teams that you could say, yeah, they got a shot.
Well, North Creek and Bothell play this week. I think we might have that one on our list, but I mean, there isn't an easy game in Kidco 4A, so it's going to be a very, very, very tough league to make the postseason. That's definitely super competitive. I'll say this: I like where Mount Si is at right now in terms of their balance and the ability to play good defense. That's going to be huge. Woodinville obviously is pretty sexy with how they've played, but I think Mount Si is actually going to be, a very, very, very tough team there. So,
yep. No, that's about it. If you want to hash out rankings or players or picks next week, what do you think?
Let's go players. It's getting late. I'm sure the players are up late past 8:30, but let's do players real quick. I'm going to rattle some off. I don't have a plethora. I know you do though. So
not in 2B. I got 2, and I bet one of them is the same player.
Well, so obviously, I've got Farrell Johnson for Raymond South Bend, who ran for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also had a 33-yard touchdown pass in that win over Ilwaco. And it does look like I have an actual 1B as well.
Wow.
It looks like for Acosta, Taryn Lewis And this comes from Justin Demashwitz. So thank you, Justin, for the heads up. But 5 rushing touchdowns in the game against North Beach. He also had 3 passing touchdowns and an interception return for a touchdown in the game. So that's
12.
like 9 total TDs accounted for in the game, and they scored 72. So 9 times 7, assuming they get all the extra points, 63 out of the 72, Taron Lewis helping account for. That's that's huge. So
that's just, we got to stop it there.
well, I do have another. I do exactly, but yeah, unfortunately, there are more. Really, I guess not. Unfortunately, but fortunately, there are more. But going back to 2B real quick, I had a great name, Rodrigo Rodriguez. I mean, I love his parents. Bless your heart. He ran for 212 yards and ran for scores of 75 and 50 in an On-Alaska win over Rainier. So 212 yards rushing. Pretty good performance for Mr. Rodrigo Rodriguez. Again, I mean, that's like the best name award right there.
I've got another one. It's my only other one in 2B, but double letters like that. Hudson Holzhauer of Stevenson, 27 tackles, 18 of them were solos, 3 tackles for loss and a sack. So I figured how many plays that offense run in that game on the opposing team, maybe 40. I think they shut him out. And 27 tackles. That's incredible. Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, that's like virtually every single tackle that your team comes up with. So
100%.
Yeah. So let's take a look here. I might have missed one out here before we move on. For La Jolla, Jack Kiloa, and he threw for 282 yards and 5 touchdowns, including the game winner in overtime in a win against Tenino. So that's a big win for La Jolla against Tenino, in my opinion. That's really good.
Yeah, 3-0.
Let's see. Moving up to 1A. Again, from Justin Demashwitz, Gabe Bodwell. I apologize, but for Montesano, 193 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns in a 48-6 win over Columbia White Salmon.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good game. Let's go another running back, Jackson Forsyth from Connell. Talk about a man on the field. 16 carries for 142 yards and 3 touchdowns in their win against, I think it was a secondary school. Now that off the top of my head. Do you have more for 1A?
No.
Okay, I got three more.
Yeah.
Bison, cool, also a cool name. Byson. Vasquez of Cascade Christian. He had 5 catches for 46 yards and a touchdown, 16 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and a forced fumble. Cole Adams from Kings, 6 catches for 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 tackles, and he also had the game-winning pass breakup as Joey Brown was going deep down the middle to Jackson Bennett to try to win that game. And then a kid that's really a stud from Seton Catholic, Joe, I think it's Calarame. It sounds Italian. I'm going with that. Could be Calarame, but 6 catches for 205 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he also carried the ball twice for 21 yards and a touchdown. He used to be the quarterback there before Gesser came to school last year as a freshman. Those are my 1As.
Good stuff. I had a couple here for 2A of Aberdeen Marcus Hale, 10 carries, 171 yards, and a 63-yard touchdown run, a part of those 171 in a win against Centralia, 28-6. And then in the Greater St. Helens League, Coach Hajek already mentioned him for Woodland High School. Elijah Anderson, He had an 84-yard catch and run touchdown in the second quarter, had 181 yards total receiving and 152 rushing, 4 total touchdowns in the ball game. And then an honorable mention for the quarterback, Brett Martinovich, who throws over 250 in the win. So a couple of guys for Woodlands really doing some special things in helping them get the victory over Washougal on the road.
Yeah, that's a huge game from Anderson. Christian McCaffrey, LaDainian Tomlinson type performance. Do you got more, or how many you want me to rattle off?
Yeah, rattle them off, my man.
You do have more or no?
I have more, but not for 2A.
Okay, so 2A, I've got 12 more, so hang with me.
Oh,
Palmer Watt of Rochester, 13 carries for 67 yards in the game-winning touchdown. Had 9 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. And then another kid from Rochester, Tate Kornstrom, 27 carries for 197 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And then a kid that's been on here 2 weeks in a row already, Tyson Glenn Thomas out of Lindbergh, 8 catches for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also 8 tackles on defense. Your boy, Logan Sloman of North Kitsap, 9 catches, 196 yards, 3 touchdowns. And then his
7-11, baby.
His quarterback had a heck of a game too. Cole Edwards, 21 of 27 for 343 and 5 touchdowns. I believe that's the same kid that was playing at the end of the year last year during their playoff run, and he's elusive. He can make some plays.
Yes.
He's only about 5'6", but he's a baller back there. Colton Magruder out of Ellensburg, 24 carries for 230 and a touchdown. Mentioned him earlier, Karsten Reynolds out of Cedro Woolley, 12 carries, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 tackles, and an interception on defense, helping shut out Seaholm. And then jumping across the Northwest Conference, we got Rylan Lang from Anacortes. Ended up having 2 receiving touchdowns, a 39-yard passing touchdown in which he hit Landon Schaefer on. And then he also blocked a punt that Schaefer picked up and scooped and scored for the touchdown. So kind of a dual combo there, mentioned in Schaefer and Lang. And then a kid you mentioned last week, actually 2 kids from Ording, because this is quite I'd like you to do the math on this real quick so we can figure out their yards per carry. But 2 running backs, Sharon Seniors, he's a freshman though, 5 attempts for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then his stablemate, Caden Whitaker, 9 carries for 138 yards and 2 touchdowns, and also had 8 tackles on defense. So, you're looking at 14 carries for 270 yards and 4 touchdowns between those 2 kids in their game last week. And then the last 2, the guy we haven't mentioned yet, but was on here every week for last year, Diesel Wilkinson out of East Valley, the Idaho commit, future teammate of Holden B. 3 touchdowns, all 3 of them were running, and 12 tackles on defense, and he was hitting people. I don't know if it was his first game or not. It was the only game he's posted tape for, but it's fun. You should go watch it because you can just tell that Diesel. Yeah. Find out if he's played. Yeah, I should. We talked to him a little bit last year, and he was watching our show quite a bit. But now
he's got more reason to watch because we're talking about him.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you put the tape on of him, and that league that he plays in is not bad, obviously. West Valley was a good team last year, but he's so much better than anybody on the field. He's a guy that runs 4.5, jumps 42 inches. He's going to Idaho, I think, to either play wide receiver or defensive back, but might be one of the best athletes in our state. And then a kid that's leading the 2A classification, might even be leading the state in rushing, from Sammamish, Ty Webster, 22 carries for 252 and 3 touchdowns. I think he's had 250 every single week so far.
That's big time, bro. That's 250 1 week in your careers. A career for most, he could sell women's shoes and talk about the glory days at Sammamish.
100%.
Numbers like that. All right, cool. Well, that's good research, man. I just I was not like able to get on like my rhythm with my laptop breaking in the game before the game this last week and stuff, and like yeah, it was just not conclusive to doing research because I had to like be strictly at home in my office like I am right now on my desktop, which is why the background is different, in terms of where I got everything located at. But yeah, plus my phone has been bugging out. So, it's what happens when you like live life dangerously. By the way, that's like if Luke Kilgore's ever watching, is like we did the state tournament for basketball last year in Yakima, and he's like, bro, you're like one of the world's most dangerous men apparently because you're living life without a phone case. I'm like, yeah. And then it's like not too much longer after that, it's like it takes a spill and cracks, and then since then it's been yeah. So whatever, that's what phone insurance is for. But you know what? It's like upgrade your phone like every 3 or 4 years because there's like 17 cameras on the newest model. But whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's keep rolling through some of these here. I got some 3A guys, of course, for Yelm. Huge day for Damian Alona. 398 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, 22 for 37 overall against Central Kitsap. And then for Mount Tahoma, Bryson Bailey, good name.
Yep.
He had 177 yards and 2 touchdowns in that win over Spanaway Lake. And apparently, a footnote, pun intended, he missed all of 2022 with a foot injury. So that's nice to see a kid bounce back and put forth a really strong effort in that win over Spanaway Lake. You already mentioned him earlier, but I'll just kind of piggyback. But Xavion Jones and Mount Lake Terrace, 265 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns against Shorewood, the Storm Rays. That's a huge win for Mount Lake Terrace, and another huge stat line for Xavion Jones. And another one for 3A, of course, back to the horses that we're used to talking about, but Jason Brown Jr. of O'Day, 112 yards on 14 carries, 5 touchdowns in that 14 carries. So 1 out of every 3 touches was going to the house, and all of them, by the way, in the first half.
And he's visiting the Ducks this weekend.
Oh my gosh, no.
I know. You said Ilona. You didn't mention Marius, his twin brother, Marius. 9 catches for 220 and 3 touchdowns. So 220 out of his twin brother's 390 went to him, and 3 out of the 5 touchdowns. And that's the second time this year they've hooked up for big numbers. So obviously some twin intuition and chemistry going on there. Let's see, what else? Who do I have? Leuven's Valchin of Auburn, 5 receptions, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns, had 6 carries on the ground for 50 yards. And he's a guy that's being looked at from a lot of, Big Ten / Pac-2 schools. But on defense, they're looking at him as linebacker and defensive end as well. And he had 10 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks in their win. Another kid, well, we haven't talked about him yet, but Juanita is a team that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Wide receiver Nolan McWilliams out of Juanita, 5 catches for 120 and 2 touchdowns. And him and his quarterback, Dallas Soto, a kid I mentioned a few weeks ago. That's a pretty good dynamic connection so far this year. You got more?
Yeah, I can conjure up another one here for sure. Let's see. We got, hope I'm pronouncing it right. Probably not, but Jake Tiryakioglu of, Yakioglu. I'm going to go with that. Tiryakioglu or something like that. I don't know. Eastside Catholic. It pays to know these things, by the way. For Eastside Catholic, 278 yards passing and 4 touchdowns in the first half against Bishop Blanchette in a victory for Eastside Catholic. So this one's kind of heavy-hearted, but a big performance for Benji Parks of Gig Harbor. And obviously for those who, know about it, the fishbowl rivalry between Gig Harbor and Peninsula had a real ugly moment in it and involved the starting quarterback for Gig Harbor having to have emergency surgery on his jaw, and there was a major stoppage in the game for roughly a half hour to get medical personnel out to him. And of course, that story broken by John Manley of the Tacoma News Tribune. But back to Benji Parks real quick. He's the starting tight end, and he comes in to replace the starting quarterback for Gig Harbor and ends up leading them to the win in the game. Has 208 yards passing and 2 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. So, big shout out to Benji Parks for his effort leading his guys. And apparently that was their first win in the series in about a decade. So huge effort there.
Yeah, definitely. Comeback W too. I'm sure they were a team playing very inspired, considering losing their quarterback in the circumstances that, anytime a kid has to be rushed to the hospital, it light a fire under your guys, hopefully. They came away victorious. Good to see. I've got a few more here. Wide receiver from Timberline, Cedric Ragland Jr., 6 catches for 160 yards and 3 touchdowns in their big bounce back win. And then little brother of our favorite Husky from Stanwood last year, Canyon Bumgarner, younger brother of Ryder. He had 8 carries for 60 yards, and then he also picked up a fumble recovery and took it back 75 yards and had an 80-yard kick return touchdown in their win. And then jumping over to a team that is in their league, Jacoby Falor out of Arlington had 100-plus receiving yards and 3 touchdowns last week, and they're rolling along. That's another league that looks wide open. 3 or 4 teams in it that have potential to be the last standing man in that one. That's it for me, 3A wise, though. Oh, you're muted.
Look at that.
There we go. Yep.
Crazy. I probably look like a mime.
Hey, at least you didn't talk for like 4 minutes like I did that one night.
Yeah, no. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job rattling them off, Foreman. So let's take a look at 4A. Let's take a look at 4A here. Sorry.
Inside joke.
I'm not 100% sure here, but I think I am. But I think Hermiston is technically a 4A school. But I got Isaac Corey of Hermiston, who went 25 for 33 for 300 yards and 3 TDs and a win over Walla Walla. So good performance there for Mr. Isaac Corey. And then, a guy that we talked about a lot last season for Emerald Ridge, but Gio Caventis with 9 catches, 167 yards and 3 TDs in the win over Sumner, the comeback win over Sumner, we should say, for Emerald Ridge. That's a big win for them. Make no mistake about it. Let's see here.
Let me interject real quick on that.
Yeah.
You said Cavensis. Let's mention their whole offense, because if you were playing fantasy football and just had the entire Emerald Ridge offense, you would have had a fantastic week. His receiving partner, that's also an Idaho commit, Tony Harst, 8 catches for $179. Their running back, Navarre Dixon, they showed they will and can run the ball too. 20 carries for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then Mr. Skockle himself, 23 of 32 for 417 and 4 touchdowns. So you can see between Cavensis with his 167 and Harst 179, they can move the ball however anybody wants. And to begin this season, I think I ranked them. I think they're at 3rd the preseason, and some guy jumped on there and was saying, "Oh, Emerald Ridge has no line play. They're not going to be any good this year. They graduated all their big guys, and it doesn't matter if they can pass the ball if they don't have anyone to protect them." And well, Sumner's a pretty hard-nosed football team. And another thing he said was, if they only had Sumner's trench play, they'd be the greatest team in the league. And anytime you move the ball for nearly 600 yards on offense, I'd say you're being protected pretty well. But
Yeah, I mean,
since we were
Emerald
talking
Ridge is
Emerald Ridge,
Emerald Ridge is super explosive. You know, I mean, you could that entire league, man, with Rocco Koch and Davion Superalis, and obviously Skockle. I mean, you can go. It's Spurbeck, right? I mean, they got all kinds of guys. So
you could argue Emerald Ridge is just as explosive as Lake Stevens and Graham Kapowsin. I mean, offensively, especially.
yeah, you know what? You might be able to make a case, honestly, for Emerald Ridge at number 1.
Frankly, where's Auntie M and James? I know yep. Auntie M's dropping some facts on us here. Little shout out. She said Kalama was actually a town named after a Hawaiian pioneer tradeswoman or tradesman.
Yeah, I mean,
excuse me.
I didn't know that, and I live 10 miles from Kalama, so I mean, shame on me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
The Chinook tribe, like it's Native American in that area. They got like a great heritage of like this great totem pole that was carved out and placed near the waterfront. Now McMenamins, they had to like take it down and renovate it a little bit, and it was kind of like it's kind of a little sad that it wasn't there at the time, but it's back now.
Sure, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You got some more guys? We got a few more.
Go ahead, man. I'm all spent on athletes. I thought I was just like trying to keep it to like the super top performances, and stuff. So
hey, anytime you got multiple touchdowns and over 100 yards,
I promise I'm gonna be doing more homework from the desktop next weekend if I have some time. So I'll make time.
If we each have 20 guys per league, it'd take us an hour, so it's okay.
Yeah, the show will get eaten up.
Yeah. Shout out Lake Stevens, your boy Jay Sean Lamar, 19 carries, 157 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a 24-yard receiving touchdown in last week's game. You mentioned Superalis from Graham Kapowsin, number 1 team ranked in the state by me. 30 of 44 for 313 and 3 touchdowns in that game, and all 3 of them went to Malachi Durant. 7 catches, 124 yards to go with it. Rocco Cope, he scored 16 touchdowns so far this year in 3 games. 10 of 14, $198, 4 touchdowns through the air, 22 carries, 157 yards and a touchdown. Pretty incredible production so far this year. And then Austin May, Federal Way, team that you guys beat. But if I could poke any holes, Austin May went for 6 catches, 230 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Scored only 2 touchdowns. So,
holy Lord, he scorched that secondary.
yeah. Still a 63-13 blowout, but a performance worth mentioning.
Did we see Austin May on the highlight reel last week? Or was it?
I think you're right, actually.
I thought we saw Austin May on the highlight reel. I could be wrong, but
maybe a kick return or something. I have to go back and look.
No, it was the broken play. Yeah, the broken play. The quarterback like rolling out to his right, like just hit him in the back of the end zone, like great throw. So yeah,
stud. He's a stud, obviously. Roy Lockley, the third of Bethel, 25 carries, 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then another running back from the SPSL, Matt Spurbeck, who we've just mentioned in that game, 14 carries for 142 yards and a touchdown. Been very productive the last 2 years. That's it, though.
Right on. Well, great performances. Andrew Bighouse has a comment, says, does Oak Harbor have a chance this week against Pilchuck?
Andrew's one of my buddies. I know where this is coming from for sure.
Yeah, I'll answer it then. I'll be a non-biased, Oak Harbor's played a tough schedule. And, teams that play tough schedules, man, I mean, anything can happen. But I probably would go Pilchuck in that one. I don't think we have that one on the list, but you go ahead and explain your inside reference here. So,
who's that? Me? Inside reference?
Yeah. You said you know where that's going. So
he's from Oak Harbor, so it makes sense that he's paying attention. But he's certainly well aware of the first 3 weeks is what has happened. Although I will say, looking at their schedule so far, they have played teams tougher than they did last year. So that's a step in the right direction. But Pilchuck beating Stanwood the way they did, that wasn't even really a competitive game. I think it's going to take the Ferndales of the world and like the Arlingtons to give Pilchuck a run. Just not in the cards for Oak Harbor.
Yeah.
Andrew's a good buddy, though. I'm glad he's watching. Shout out to Andrew for sure. He's our side note, talking fantasy football. He's probably he'll just eat this up that I would say this, but he's like the Bill Belichick of our long-standing football league. It's been going for like 12, 15 years, and he has won, I don't know. He'll probably let us know in the title his exact record, but I think he's won at least 7 championships. So, yeah, little sidebar.
There we go. I'm a big fan of sidebar. So
I lost to him last year in the championship game. We'd been waiting 13 years for it, and he kicked my butt. You got my rankings up now? Let's pick these things.
I do.
Apart.
Yeah, I do. I got them up for 2B currently. And, we can spend as much time as you want on this, but, ultimately, I think that there's so much that's on people's minds today. It's more so like, why are the WIAA rankings are what they are? I even saw Coach Cooper of Highline kind of like throw a comment out there, that was since deleted. But it's hard to take those rankings seriously, at this point in the year. And I don't think anybody really should. And more so than anything else, I mean, week 8, week 9, that's when you're probably going to get like the most accurate determination as to whether or not they hold water. Gives you something to think about in terms of teams that you weren't thinking of, like, as you like to say, off the beaten path, Right. So I think that for right now that, you're doing a pretty good job of like kind of nailing down what most of the perceptions are amongst people with eyes and not computers who don't have a sense of, like vision. They just look strictly at wins, losses, and formula, algorithm.
Points for, points against. Yeah.
That's why Skynet lost, right, in Terminator, because it doesn't have vision. So I ultimately think that, with where you're at with most of the rankings and where, the AP is at, like the AP poll also got released today. I got no real beef or issues with what the AP thinks, but gives us something to talk about. It's like I mentioned, it's like, I know that other computer rankings haven't come out quite yet. And it had like after Highline beat Rainier Beach and lost to Kennedy Catholic by like a little bit, it had them at like 45 or something like that. It's laughable, It's
right.
like, there's not even, once you see something like that, you just like, see ya, like, I'm done. Like, what? There's no point in commenting. There's no point in giving away any of your air for it.
Right.
Just let the games play out. Show up, take care of your business. It's rankings do matter when it comes time to like the committees, getting like a head full of ideas about like what the state perception is and stuff. But at the end of the day, I mean, teams are going to take the field. The rankings don't mean shit at that point. All it means is just it gives us something to talk about. And we're not running a sports book here, right? We're not.
Yeah.
we're not trying to figure out who should be favored, and what the spread is. It's just, let's go out, let's play the game. But anyway, on the bottom of our screen here, if you can see at home, is our 2B rankings. Napavine 1, Okanagan 2. That's been the same all year long. Lynn Ritzville Sprague holds at 3. Toledo holds at 4. Northwest Christian rises to 5. Raymond South Bend at 6. Kalama 7. Riverview still in the top 10 at 8. PL Willapa Valley combo at 9. And then Manson, newcomer, at 10. Tyson, if you just want to briefly walk us through 2B real quick.
Yeah, like you mentioned, not a whole lot changed. Going back to the list here. Riverview last week was at 6. and Northwest Christian I had at 5. So they ultimately remain in that same position. Since it was such a comfortable win for Northwest Christian, I ended up moving Riverview down 2 spots, with them getting jumped by Raymond South Bend and Kalama. Despite Kalama's loss, the center, as we know and have talked about, is a great 1A team. So you can't take anything away from that. And they played, like we said before, they played Woodland tough too, putting up 30 points against them. So, anyways, they have settled in. They didn't break into my top 10 till last week, before the La Center game, but playing quality opponents like that, putting up a fight, it shows you're up there. So they slide up to 7. Riverview drops to 8. PL Willapa Valley actually moves down a spot, from 8 overall. Let's see, who was it that jumped? Oh, Kalama ultimately jumped PL Willapa Valley too, which is what pushed them down a spot. Not that they played bad with their 46-12 win over Wakayakum. It's actually probably their most comfortable win so far this year. But Manson slid in at 10. I was looking at a couple other teams, obviously Onalaska, Chewelah with they had a redemption win against Reardon, who is a team that has played pretty tough so far this year. Goldendale's another team I've had my eye on in the 2B. And frankly, Friday Harbor, that week 1 win against South Woodby, I think, is more impressive than it looks like on paper. They beat LaConner 41-0. So I'm looking at them, but ultimately Manson, all 3 wins for them have been pretty comfortable, taking on Asotin this last week, beating them 42-26, 38-27 against Kittitas the week before, 35-6 against Cleon the week before that. Have a running back that's probably the best player in that league, and a quarterback up there that's really a good athlete. So they've got, I'm not sure that they end up playing Chelan, basically to segment into my 1A rankings. But, up there around the lake, they got a couple pretty good quality football teams that I don't think you can look over at this point in the year. And so all my rankings have kind of 9 and 10 have been introducing essentially 1 through 8 for the most part has stayed the same all year, at least the same 8 teams, and 9 and 10 have been kind of, you introduce a team that looks like it could be there, and then maybe one of them loses, but there's still that next echelon of teams that are still unbeaten. So I'm excited to see where their season goes. I was just looking up their schedule, Manson. They don't end up playing Chelan. I wish they kind of did. That'd be a fun rivalry there across town. But they do have a matchup with Lake Roosevelt, Brewster, and Okanagan to end the year. So, realistically, a team that could come in second in that league and find themselves at state anyways.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, dissecting your rankings here, Napavine and Okanagan still clear 1 and 2. Lynn Ritzel Sprague, absolutely. Toledo, yes. Northwest Christian, yes. Raymond South Bend at 6, yes. I think when you get to 7, 8, 9, and 10, it becomes a little bit more muddled. But ultimately, I can see why Kalama's still there at 7, because I do believe ultimately that they are potentially a bona fide 7th, 6th best team in right. 2B. If I was to put a team on the radar that we don't see here, I'd put Forks on the radar. Forks is 3-0 currently right now, and they've got a game on the road against Ilwaco, and Ilwaco will probably be, looking to get back into that conversation for maybe getting into the top 10 themselves after losing to Raymond South Bend. No shame in losing to RSB, especially with Farrell Johnson as, the horse at running back position for them. So I really do think that Forks is a team that, with a win on the road against Ilwaco, probably should end up being in the rankings. I don't believe that Forks and Kalama play this year, so I'll have to double check on that. I don't know if you got the spreadsheet up, but they're a team that at 4-0, I think it would be really hard for you to not have ranked. And, even though Kalama may end up being ahead of them by the end of the season, I think in terms of where we're at right now, they probably deserve to be in that consideration. Another team that we can talk about is in 1A coming up here, but there's a matchup going on with 2-3-0 teams that, again, are teams off the beaten path. One of them is going to be 4-0. So, I mean, we'll talk about it in a little bit. And once you get to that 4-0 stage, I think you kind of got to start taking teams seriously and they're for real type thing. So, all right, let's move on. Unless you got anything else to add on 2B.
Nope. Interested in that Forks game, though, the Forks-Ilwaco matchup, because Ilwaco beat 2 Lake. Was it what was the score of that game?
Like 49-0 or something like that?
Yeah, I had it on here. I start looking at my spreadsheet, and it all just kind of blends together. Yeah, 49-0. And then we know 2 Lake beat Martin White Pass 24-12. And Forks beat Martin White Pass 40-0 last week. So, just trying to draw parallels. It should be interesting to see if that's
should be a good game.
How it shakes out. Yeah, for sure.
It's at Ilwaco too. So I mean, we'll learn a little bit more about Forks. I had a feeling that Raymond South Bend was going to be able to take care of business against Ilwaco, but we'll learn a little bit more about Forks coming up. So. I need to get me some of that water myself. Yeah. Right, on the bottom of your screen is the 1A rankings, and coming in at number 1, big shocker, Royal, still holding strong at the number 1 spots, and deservingly so. And then coming in at number 2, Kings, the Knights, after a victory against Nooksack Valley, and number 3 is Nooksack Valley. They don't drop too far in your rankings, Tyson. And then number 4, all they do is keep winning, Kashmir. Number 5, Lakeside 9 Mile Falls. Number 6, Montesano. Number 7, La Center. Number 8, Linden Christian. Entering the rankings is Seton Catholic at 9, and then Chelan at 10. Walk us through it, buddy.
Well, let me pull up why. So, yeah, Royal, not to recap it, but Nooksack was a team I had clearly at number 2 first 3 weeks and since the preseason, and Kings winning that game. Ultimately, I had to put them at 2. They were a team that was really, they're at 5 the whole year. So you beat a team like that, it's worthy of jumping up and taking their place. And ultimately, I still think Nooksack it's involved in the cream that's at the top of the 1A classification. They had a stumble last year too, and I think they're only more improved this season. That's frankly the only reason Kashmir slides down a spot. I'm just as high on them as I am Nooksack for the most part. I've said that over and over again. They're about as physical as it gets. And Lakeside, they haven't made any of their wins. Week 2, they beat East Valley pretty handily, 35-14, but 18-7 against Deer Park last week. Obviously, their big win against Linden Christian in week 1, 14-8. Clearly have a solid defense. But, basically, moving Kings up, it slid both those teams down a spot. Monty stays solid at 6. They're just rolling over everybody that they've played so far. And then La Center stays at 7, despite their close win over a lower classification school. But as we said, Kalama is pretty darn good. Linden Christian is starting to roll. More than doubled their points from the week before against Archbishop, beat Bellevue Christian 63-6. And then, frankly, Royal's done this to 2 teams now. Toppenish was in the top 10 even after their week 1 loss, or after their week 1 loss to Royal 35-7, and Zilla's been in the top 10 all year and parts of last year, and ultimately Royal beats them even worse, 48-7. And I think Zilla is a better team than Toppenish, so it just shows how good Royal really is. And then Riverside beating Colville 31-7. They have a case to be in here too, but ultimately I put Seton Catholic in at 9 because so far they've played some good teams themselves. Last week, Life Christian Academy, they put up 53, beat a pretty solid team in Goldendale, despite being a 2B team the week before, and then ultimately beating Rochester 32-30. That looks like a pretty good win as time goes on, because I think Rochester's been better than people probably expected. Like I mentioned two of their players and the stat performances earlier, but Chelan ends up there. I value their win against Brewster being as comfortable as it was. It's Brewster. They're not ranked, but they are a decent team for being 2B. They're no Okanagan, but a good win. And then beating Meridian, a team that is feisty and I think tougher than, a lot of people mention the other teams from that conference, but they're not a tough out in any game. And then beating Cleveland 42-7. Ultimately, they have a running back I love, Lance Gogol, who's 5'10", 210. He's a lot like that Brody Bonus from Lynn Ritzville, just fast, does track, runs through you, runs by you. So ultimately, I found them to be a threat, but there's a few other teams very high on my watch list. Sultan is there at 3-0. LaSalle is there at 3-0. I've liked Granite Falls since prior to the season started. They got a good quarterback and wide receiver combination. So there's a couple other teams that I was like, I could very well, slide them in at 9 or 10. But I felt Seton Catholic and Chelan were the two most that I believed in their wins so far.
Yeah, I mean, 1 and 2, very, very, very good with that. Royal at 1, perfect. Kings at 2, deservingly so after the win against Nooksack Valley. 3 through 7, that's where you can kind of start interchanging some pieces. If you ask me, I think Nooksack may be the third best team, but with where they're losing at in the season, and when you look at the teams right below them and how they're performing, Lakeside with a win over Linden Christian at 5, Kashmir at 4. They've been doing nothing but win. Montesano, La Center, nothing but winning. La Center's been beating teams that are very good the entire time. I think you could really make a case for them to maybe be slotted above Nooksack Valley and maybe have to make Nooksack Valley work their way back up with, picking up some wins and watching some other teams potentially stumble along the way. But ultimately, when you get to that 9, 10, 11, 12 range, very interchangeable as well. And Stevenson, a team that is at 3-0 that takes on Seton Catholic this week, and they have a chance to maybe take their spot coming into next week with a win over Seton Catholic. So,
yeah, definitely. I think that's a team that's certainly on the rise. Seton Catholic, they have quite a few, it's a Catholic school. They've got some good athletes down there. I mentioned Calarame earlier in the year, but I thought maybe I'm mistaken, or Max Preps is mistaken, but Stevenson is a 2B opponent. They play down with Kalama and Toledo and Onalaska and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, more so than them, they should be ranked in 2B. I thought that they were in the same. I thought they were in the Trico 1A. I thought that was a league matchup there with Seton Catholic. So
they might have. It says non-district according to Max Preps, and maybe they used to be in the Trico and they've since moved down. But now Seton Catholic's got to compete with the likes of the Center for that league title, and Castle Rock, Fort Vancouver, Kingsway Christian, and Columbia.
Nice. Well, obviously, there's going to be some big matchups, later on down the road. We got a big one this week in 1A. We'll pick it later on in the show with Royal and Linden Christian. So very interchangeable though. And I don't see teams like Montesano and La Center losing. I think La Center plays, is it Cannell this week? And they also might have Mount Baker on the schedule as well, but those would probably be really the only teams that I would see them potentially getting tripped up by. But yeah, with where Montesano's at and how Eatonville's been playing, I mean, they took it on the chin last week, and Tenino having a tough year, so I think Montesano is the clear runaway favorite in EVCO 1A, so they could end up entering the playoffs undefeated.
For sure. Definitely. Yeah, it'd be interesting. Ultimately, the 1 through 8, I feel like will be 1 through 8 until we have to pick playoff teams because one of those two NWCers are off the table at that point.
Now on the bottom of your screen on the ticker, the 2A rankings. Number 1, Enumclaw. Number 2, Tumwater. Number 3, Highline. Number 4, Linden. Number 5, Anacortes. 6, Cedar Woolley. 7, North Kitsap. 8, Washougal. 9, Ording. And number 10, the Woodland Beavers. I'll start here real quick. I'll get your reasoning afterwards, but I kind of want to put some feelers out with you and maybe stoke the conversation a little bit. I think Tumwater's number 1. Like, I get Enumclaw hasn't done really anything wrong to this point, and, you know, they've gotten quality wins, you know, but based on how Tumwater has been winning their games and taking Kelso apart last week, has really and what they did with North Kitsap has really separated them in my eyes from Enumclaw. I think that Tumwater is way more complete on both sides of the ball, and it's hard to say that after Enumclaw gets a shutout win last week, you know. So that's just where I'm at between those two teams specifically, since you've got them at number 1 and number 2. Cedar Woolley, again, a team that just absolutely took apart a team that was on the radar for a lot of other schools. You know, coming in at 6, I would have them above Linden. I'd have them above Anacortes, you know, and currently. Highline, I'd probably have them above them currently, although Highline's only loss is to a 4A team that played for the state championship in 4A last year for Kennedy Catholic. So, I mean, it's really hard to like penalize them in the rankings for it. I get the justification for it. I think that they very well could be the 3rd best team. 7, 8, 9, 10. I think North Kitsap probably is, you know, the better of those 4 teams. So I got no problem with them being at 7. I think Woodland probably deserves to be above, you know, Washougal at this point. And I think Ording still has some things to prove, but they look good so far. Walk us through it.
Yeah, Enumclaw over Tumwater is really just a product of them returning so much of their team last year, and it's probably more biased than anything. I think they might not get as much attention as Tumwater as far as their players, given the history of Tumwater's success in recent years. You know, the spotlight is there a little more often, but kind of mentioned it before. The culture that they have at Enumclaw, the toughness that they play with, the style that they play with, they are well-rounded to the point that they could probably pass it with most any team in the 2A class, and they're going to run it down your throat as physical as any team in the 2A class. So, you know, I definitely feel like they're pretty exchangeable, I guess I would say, in the 1-2 spot, but frankly, I've had Enumclaw above Tumwater the whole time, and like I said, Enumclaw is kind of like, you know, Ferndale has been this year, or was a team we just mentioned earlier that hasn't necessarily put up all the points in the games that you would think maybe they should have. Started a little bit slower, but frankly, I think, you know, they're not a team that really cares to go spread it around and have the game be 52-0 at halftime. They just want to control the ball and play old school physical football. But moving down the list, Highline stays at 3, and they've earned that with scheduling tough non-conference games. Anacortes Linden moves to they stay at number 4 overall. You know, they've looked really good the last couple of weeks, getting back to running the ball and pounding teams, getting away from that week 1 approach they had against Ferndale. Anacortes looked great last week. Cedar Woolley looked great last week, and I think they're all back to back with good reason, and because frankly that league is just so good. Coming in at number 6, we've got Cedar Woolley is at 6, and then 7 we go to North Kitsap. So that was a 20-point loss to Tumwater. However, North Kitsap returned quite a few guys from last year. Their offense clicked this last week. I think at this point they're just better than a lot of teams are that are below them, frankly, despite that easy win by Tumwater in that game. And, to call out my own hypocrisy in having a team ranked ahead of another team that beat them. Mind you, Woodland's not undefeated. They did lose to La Center in the same fashion Kalama did, with single-digit points, giving up 17. And Washougal obviously lost by 5 to Woodland, which in a sense, logical sense, you'd think Woodland would be better, but I think it was a hiccup for Washougal. We saw them roll last year, and they have the best quarterback in 2A from a recruiting standpoint and pound for pound. And when it gets late in the year and you need a guy to turn to, that's something they have that a lot of these other teams don't have, that is quite as dynamic as he is at the quarterback position overall. So I think, if I'm hypothesizing, if those two teams matched up later in the year, I'm still taking Washougal in that game. And ultimately, that's why I left them where they are. Woodland, obviously, like you said earlier, they got so hot last year and were one of the hottest teams, but they still kind of tend to ride a roller coaster. And like you said, they played almost a flawless game. And I think, frankly, that's what it took to beat that team. And if they don't play that way again next time, I think Washougal, hypothesizing, but they have the talent to beat a lot of teams in this list by a touchdown or two if everything's clicking for them, and they themselves are the ones playing the perfect game. So,
well, Woodland can pound the rock. I mean, if it's a November setting and they play again in the playoffs, that'd be the only way it could happen. I mean, I don't know. It's I need to see a little bit. I need to see a little bit more from Washougal in terms of being able to generate points without relying on B to Evers, because Evers was held to about 90 yards total in the game against Woodland, and with Coach McDonald being really good at game planning, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I'll say this, that I think Woodland is very deserving of potentially being in the top 10, but to get them in the top 10, right? I know that they have that win over Washougal. We are overlooking the potential for teams like Rogers that we really don't know a lot about. I really don't know a lot about. We're also overlooking Bremerton. Olympics sitting there with one loss now. I mean, there's some teams that are, in the mix that aren't getting a lot of love, and like I said earlier, as the season goes on, if you keep winning, eventually, you're going to break through it and be a part of the conversation. You're going to have a seat at the table, so to speak, there. So it's at this point, it's great to have the debate and talk about it, right? But I still feel that with 2A, the debate really ranges between 1 through 5, because even though Linden's got that loss, I mean, we're really overlooking them, right? I mean, like, by not talking about them, just knowing that one of them, Anacortes and Cedro, is on the outside looking in. I mean, I'm not saying maybe 2, because Seaholm's not out of it, but maybe 2, Who knows? Like, anything can really happen in that league. And Enumclaw is probably safe in my estimation, but they have a matchup coming up with Ording. So big opportunity for the Cardinal, so we'll see how it goes. I think 2A though is more of a top 5, top 6 horse race at this point. I really like its potential though. I think its depth is kind of proving to be a little bit sneakier. Like I mentioned with Woodland, it's like there could be some teams there, and there's going to be Prosser again, Aberdeen. They're kind of maybe sneak into the conversation. They play this week.
Looking to Idaho, you can't rule out Pullman or Clarkston either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you really can't. So we're going to figure out a lot when it comes to 2A. And, there's going to be bids from Central and Eastern Washington that are going to be underseeded. If you look at last year where Kashmir ended up seeded, they were really underseeded, based on how they played in the playoffs and how they came into this year. That's the hard part with rankings and seeding committees, is that you're going to undervalue teams that probably should have been, more respected at least.
Oh, for sure. Definitely.
Give me 1 second.
If I could switch over the ticker, I would. Guess we don't need a ticker. Could kind of.
No, we're good.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah, 3A. Much the same thing. There's 10 through 15 are all pretty interchangeable as well.
Yeah, let's go through it real quick. O'Day 1, Yelm at 2, Eastside Catholic at 3, Kennewick at 4, Bellevue at 5, Garfield at 6, Monroe at 7, Mount Spokane 8, Ferndale 9, and then Juanita at 10. Just tell me that Juanita is just like a glorified shout out, or is there something that you see with Juanita that you think really holds water?
Well, looking at their schedule thus far, I mean, every game's been easy. Not that they've had a daunting opponent. 45-14 over Hazen. They dropped 70 on Jackson, beat them 70-7, and then 39-7 against Inglemoor in week 1. Overall, it's their quarterback. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the class of 25, and certainly within the league that they play in. Two-sport athlete, plays shortstop on the diamond, and playing under or behind center on the football field. He's really a guy that can make any play with his legs or his arm. Has a good receiver to throw to. They played teams tough last year. Soto was only a sophomore, and this year he's a junior. And frankly, it's just a team that, if they're not on your radar, at the very least, they should be, because they've got
recruit radar.
Yep, they're on that radar for sure. But looking at the 10 spot, I mean, strongly considered Arlington. Their schedule is kind of the same thing, though. It doesn't tell me a whole lot. Big win over Mount Vernon, Marysville, Getchell, and Kamiak. 3 games that they should win, much like the Juanita schedule. Ultimately, it came down to I bumped Lincoln out of my top 10, and I had to replace him with somebody. I thought about maybe Mount Tahoma, looked at like a Mountain View and a Seattle Prep. But overall, there was no other team outside of this top 10 that their wins and their schedule thus far really jumped off the paper to me. Marysville Pilchuck, obviously their win over Stanwood was big, but they only beat Getchell 28-6, where Arlington beat Getchell 42-7. So if we use that game as a judgment, it's not always. It's a game of matchups.
We talk about their defense held them to 1 less point.
Yeah, that's true. It is true. But that league is one where it's like, I just want to see a little bit more from.
Well, we will soon, because Ferndale and Arlington play this week, and
exactly.
I mean, if they beat if Arlington beats Ferndale, I think that you got to be impressed with them enough to get them above 10 even. I mean, that'd be a big win.
Definitely.
Considering Ferndale beat Linden, and Linden doesn't lose to anybody but Ferndale. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. And ultimately, Lincoln still is probably a top 10 team in terms of talent. But the main reason I slid them out of the top 10 is I'm kind of just concerned with their offensive output. Their defense has obviously played good. Beat Auburn Riverside 17-0 in week 1, and they go down there to Tualatin. Did I say it right this time?
Tualatin.
Okay. 14-17 loss in that game, and then 21-7 against Camas. So, altogether it's only 38 points on the year. Rocco Koch himself has scored 11 more touchdowns so far this year. So that's not really a relative comparison, but overall, you just want to see a team put up a little bit more offense for a team that's been notoriously a good offensive team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with Mount Spokane and Monroe both being undefeated to this point, they're in the conversation for me to be above Garfield, although I know Garfield plays a really tough schedule. Losing to Lake Stevens, I mean, no shame in that.
Yeah.
So I think that they're very much, in that conversation with where you've got them in the rankings. I would probably say that the first three spots are fairly interchangeable. See, the thing that
For
I have a
sure.
problem with, I know I haven't really brought it up to this point yet, but if I had a problem with anything, I would say that O'Day hasn't won yet against Eastside Catholic in recent memory to make me truly believe that they're better. Even though Eastside Catholic lost some guys, and that's the reason why we all collectively talked about O'Day being ranked above them before the season started. And O'Day hasn't done anything to deserve losing the number one spot. But in a head-to-head setting, which we will find out what happens, Eastside Catholic has gotten the better end of those matchups in recent memory. Yelm has done a good job of, I won't say rebounding because they haven't lost yet, but we all know that they almost lost to Camas. And Camas has turned out to be a very good team so far in 4A, so no shame in almost dropping a game on the road to the Papermakers. But I do feel that those are interchangeable teams at this point. Having them 1, 2, and 3, totally fine with that. Kennewick's a huge wild card here, man. I mean the Lions, again, if you're named Lions, things are looking pretty good for you. They're a huge wild card with where
Haven't really played anybody, obviously. Sunnyside's not a bad team though. 42-7. That's commanding.
No, but their defense is really good, and we'll see how they play this week. They got a good game against Kamiakin coming up in a battle of Kennewick, so that's going to be a really good matchup to keep your eye on there. Bellevue at 1 and 2. I mean, obviously they're going to be the highest rated 1 and 2 team in the state, deservedly so at 5. You can even make a case for them being able to beat any of the teams above them. So I really like the competition in 3A. I mean, 3A, 1A, yes. I mean, and now 4A all of a sudden super deep. Like there's just a plethora of teams that are going to end up competing. And with Ferndale beating Linden at 9, I mean, God, it just shows you how deep 3A is.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's a lot that we'll figure out in the next. There's the Mount Lake Terraces, the stadiums, Pilchuck, obviously Arlington's Evergreen, a team that's 3-0 and has put up big points on a lot of people.
Yes, Evergreen's got a couple of D1 guys too. So I mean, they're a team that's being heavily slept on in Greater St. Helens League. I mean, Mountain View you just mentioned as a potential outsider looking in. I think Evergreen's got a pretty legitimate argument to be ranked above them and to be feared a little bit more. And we just don't know a whole lot about them quite yet, but
for sure.
Once the league schedule starts, they're going to have an opportunity to make their names for themselves. I think Mountain View, Evergreen, and Kelso are going to be fairly interchangeable in Greater St. Helens League, but in terms of how they compare to the other teams across the state in 3A, I mean, we just saw what happened last year with a decent Mountain View team against Rainier Beach, right? Like it really wasn't that close. And then Ferndale and Kelso in the next round, again, Ferndale quite a bit better. So there's a huge gap, right, between the top 10 in 3A and the next 10. Like that, the drop off from 11 through 20 is pretty drastic, honestly. So
the league we know the least about in 3A is Pierce County for sure. I mean, Bonnie Lake beating Lakes this week. You got Stadium, Mount Tahoma, Bonnie Lake, Spanaway Lakes, and Lincoln. I think everybody thought it was Lakes and Lincoln.
Lake Sacagawea, Black Lake, Lake Minnetonka, Moses Lake.
Yeah, but Lakes and Lincoln are sitting down there at the bottom spot in the standings, and that was what people probably would have picked their 1-2. So that's kind of interesting. There's a lot of attrition going on there so far. It's early, but yeah, lot to work out in that classification. Yeah, I mean,
I like Evergreen at 3-0, Jake. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I still feel the drop off. You know, I just until I see it, you know, I just can't wrap my mind around the idea of a team like in the top 10 that we see here on the ticker, like dropping a game to a team from Greater St. Helens League in a playoff setting. I mean, it's happened obviously before, but not very often. All right, let's move on. 4A. We could talk about another Greater St. Helens League team. In fact, we could talk about two of them. But this is the meat and potatoes for most everybody is the 4A rankings. That's why we
4A is the most. They're the most boring this week. They're the only change was the matchup of Mount Si.
Yeah, look who's number one still. Wow, look at that, Graham Kapowson. Man, no one can change your mind on that. Lake Stevens number 2, Skyview at number 3, Emerald Ridge at 4, Mount Si at 5, Bothell at 6, Moses Lake at 7, Curtis at 8, Camas 9, Kamiakin at 10. Yeah, it's going to take a Herculean effort, it looks like, for Lake Stevens to end up jumping Graham Kapowson in your rankings here, buddy. I mean, I think Lake Stevens at 2 is, interchangeable, like we've talked about all year long with number 1. I think that they're very much deserving and being considered. And until the matchup plays out, if it does play out, I mean, you're going to be able to go back and forth. If you look at the AP rankings, they had Lake Stevens slightly ahead. They had, I think, 1 maybe more first place vote or 2 more first place votes, but they were just barely above Graham Kapowson. So, you can kind of see that everybody's torn on which team is actually better. Skyview's defense is like really good this year. So them at 3 is very justifiable. They have the type of defense that can hold down a high-powered offense like the Emerald Ridge that's right below them, like the Graham Kapowson, like the Lake Stevens, so their offense isn't too shabby either. With
Trey
quarterback
Jacob and Packer.
And then Packer and Gavin Packer, exactly. So
he made a heck of a catch last week.
I agree.
That was his first game too. Sorry.
You're good. Bothell at 6 to me, I'm not super crazy about. I think Woodinville needs to be in that spot. I mean, I'm not going to call you out, but I mean, it's like I think that you got to put Woodinville there instead.
Let's put it this way: Skyview beat Jesuit on the road 28-0, and Bothell traveled to Skyview, and it took a second quarter comeback.
Oh, the game was
second half comeback.
Skyview.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The Jesuit Skyview game was in Skyview.
Oh, it was at Skyview. Okay, it was on the road last year, but either way, played him tighter than Jesuit did.
Sure.
And Bothell came off a win week 1, traveled all the way back to New York and kicked the crap out of some team back there. I mean, I could easily put Moses Lake or Curtis in a spot like that. Woodinville is obviously a team to consider. Kennedy Catholic's a team to consider. 4A is pretty deep, honestly. I think any of these teams, GK, Lake Stevens 1-2, probably the most obvious, but 3 and 4, I think they could beat either one of those two teams. Mount Si, we're learning more about them. I'd say Bothell, Moses Lake, Curtis, Camas, the Kamiakins, Kennedy Catholics, those guys are kind of all in their own group, but they're all plenty good enough that they could beat any of those 1 through 4 teams as well.
Yeah, I think Woodinville and Eastlake are the teams here that are left off the list that probably have the biggest gripe.
Yeah, and then you got the Eastmonts of the world and Gonzaga Prep, who their only loss was to Inglewood of California, a notoriously good place to play football. So North Creek is solid. Obviously, played a really good Mount Si team pretty close. Sumner being at 1 and 2, they're good enough that they're a quality enough team. You could still realistically put them in someone's top 10, and I wouldn't be offended by it. Woodinville, obviously, very comfortable wins in all 3. Excited to see them play. They got Coeur d'Alene this weekend. That usually a pretty darn good football team that, interesting that they're playing 2 out-of-state teams this year. Definitely.
Well, obviously, if Blake Stevens does end up taking care of West Lynn, which is going to be a pretty tall order to do, but yeah, I got no problems with having them as the clear-cut number 1, and I think that would make everybody's job a lot easier when it comes to putting their ballots in. Because as of right now, I mean, I still truly think it's the flip of a coin, man. So,
totally.
All right. If anyone's got any comments in the rankings here, throw them in real quick. Jake says Skyview. Yeah, I mean, Skyview is really good. I think that they've proven to be a very worthy team. But I think anybody can come up with wins after the top 2, Tyson. I think that anybody 3 through about 12 can knock each other off, just depending on where the game's played, what the weather's like, what the stylistic matchup looks like. Like, are you telling me that a Woodinville can't take down Skyview? I don't think so. I think that that's a very close game. I think that that's going to be that'd be a very, very, very good matchup. In Eastlake as well against the Skyview. I think that that's a very realistic potential matchup there. So
definitely. No, there's a few other undefeated teams too that, who knows by the time it's all set. Richland's put up big offense on everybody. That's
the Bombers.
Yep, they got Chiawana, a team that, we didn't even mention yet, but they're in a lot of other rankings still. So
good defense.
Yep, definitely. Pretty good quarterback too, and they've got the offense rolling the last 2 weeks. So
was that DJ Durant?
Yep, right? Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, but overall, I feel really comfortable about 1 through 4, and the rest of them are, frankly, I feel pretty good about this top 10 overall. But I'd say from a 1 through 16 standpoint, there's there's more dangerous teams at 10 through 16 in 4A as far as what they oppose or present as a problem compared to, say, number 1 and 2 in comparison to all the other classifications.
Right on, man. Well, good job on the rankings this week, and we'll see how the games play out. Speaking of how the games play out, let's talk about the 20 games that we're going to pick this week, and we'll burn through them here real quick and make our picks, and then we'll let you know what Devin is thinking as well. So,
pulled open.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just going off of the order that Devin sent them over here, and let's see what we got. So the first game that we've got here looks like Chiawana at Richland. We just talked about it here, and it looks like Devin is going to go with Chiawana in that one. I'm not quite ready to put Richland over in this one, but huge opportunity for the Bombers this week to take on a team that just lost a couple of games over the last season and a half or so. I think it's a lot to ask, so I'm going to stick with Chiawana in this one. I think defense is key in this game and will do enough to limit the Bombers' offense. So I'm going to go with Chiawana, the Riverhawks.
I will be the outlier. I'm going to take that high-powered 800 yards in one game offense Richland's got. Trust that they turn this game into a shootout. Like, for example, jumping up a couple classifications, the Lions and the Seahawks are both teams that have defensive-minded teams, but it's turned into a crazy shootout the last 2 years. I think that this one does turn into a shootout, and despite Chiawana's defense. I think Richland could have a little bit higher powered offense than everybody probably saw coming.
All righty, let's stick in 4A. More Kimco action this Mount I against Skyline. This one is at Skyline, 3-0 Mount Si, 2-1 Skyline, and we know Skyline's defense is of high quality, having only given up 9 points to Eastlake last week. I still like the balance, though, that the Wildcats bring, and it'll be an interesting game, but I think the offense can do slightly more than the Spartans. So I'm going to go Wildcats on the road in an upset. If you call it an upset. I don't know if you call it an upset.
You said Skyline, or who'd you say?
Mount Si at Skyline, and I'm going Mount Si.
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't say that's an upset. I'm taking Mount Si as well. It looks like Devin did also.
Yep. So, all right. Well, all three of us agree on that one. And another 4A Kingco matchup. We got Bothell at North Creek, the Battle of Bothell. And last year was the first year that North Creek had beaten Bothell. So you know what that means. Bothell returns the favor. I'm going with them in a bounce back, taking out North Creek on the road.
Yep, clean sweep. I think their improved offense this year is going to be a little too much for North Creek.
Although I do like how North Creek competed against Mount Si last week. Was not easy. This was not easy. I feel that in rivalry games that, you know, in a close setting matchup, I always like the team that lost the previous year to get one back.
Yep, definitely.
Usually. Let's see here. Is that it for 4A? I think for straight 4A, that's all.
Emerald Ridge and Curtis.
Emerald Ridge and Curtis. That is a great game. Yes, we are going to pick that one. Boy, wow, that's like game of the week almost, man. Like that's crazy.
Pretty much, yeah.
How about you start on this one? I'll make up my mind after you pick. How about that?
Well, I wrote down Emerald Ridge a couple days ago when I did this, but I love Rocco Coke. I'm taking Curtis.
Yeah, I mean, it is razor thin, man. I'm telling you what, like in a game like this, like it's really going to come down to which team can make a defensive stop, right? Like,
yeah,
I got this feeling in me that Curtis has one more defensive stop in them than ER does, but I believe in Emerald Ridge as a team that can win the championship. I really do. So
me too.
This is just such a tough game, man. Like, I'm glad that we're blessed with the ability to even talk about this game and pick it. I mean, you want to talk about two absolute dogs. Like, who do you want the ball in the hands of more at the end of the game? I mean, Coke or Skockle. I mean, they both just exude confidence and in their ability to come back and win if needed. It's just, man, this is so tough.
That'd be the best quarterback matchup we see all year.
Oh my goodness! Like, other than potentially when they play against Super Alice and
Right.
and Matson as well. I mean, geez Louise, man. I could go on. I'm stammered on who to pick here. So I need to catch up. I'm gonna go Emerald Ridge. So I mean, I can't catch up to you agreeing with you. So I'm gonna go ER.
All right. Yep. Sounds good. I with total good reason. Like I said, just changed it, and you don't feel confident about it either way. But Coke's ability to just make play after play. And
I agree.
Do it in a way where he's ultimately putting the whole game on his back with 20 plus carries every single week. He's an exciting player. It's honestly asinine that he hasn't gotten a look from some high quality D1 school to even play anything else. He's such a good athlete. It baffles me. I think at one point all he had looking at him was Puget Sound, and that's like who are these coaches kidding? Shocking, especially playing in that league.
Jake, oh, excuse me, Devin's going with Jake and ER. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, then you want to talk about an all Washington 4A game of the week, man. That is just an absolute treat for everybody. I mean, if you weren't ready to anoint Curtis as a contender, if they get a win this week, man, I mean, you cannot deny the fact that they could potentially be a team that makes a run, a real run, like, you know,
Definitely.
not just to the quarterfinals, you know.
Right.
So, all right, let's move on. Let's drop down to 3A. Let's throw a crossover game in here first, though. Let's go Kamaikan and Kennewick here.
Yep.
And I mean, there's another tough one. This one's at Kamaikan. I mean, but it's another one of those, you know, rivalry games. Ultimately, I'm going with Kamaikan in this one because I think that they've played a tougher schedule to this point, and I think they're going to be better off for it. So I'm going with Kamaikan.
Devin did too. I watched Kamaikan in person, obviously, against Moses Lake. I haven't seen Kennewick even play so far this year, but I saw places where Kamaikan was susceptible and Kennewick scoring more. Granted, they haven't played a challenging opponent, like you said, but they're scoring more points than they did last year. I'm taking Kennewick, so outlying on this one.
No, you've seen Kamaikan in person, and you know, but that also says a lot about Kamaikan's defense because you've ranted and raved about Moses Lake's offense and their explosive ability. So,
right,
you know, holding them to 15 points, albeit in a weird, you know, type of game, still. I don't know. I'm just gonna
certainly have a good defense.
I'm just going Braves. I'm going Braves in this one. Braves over the Lions.
Yeah, technically, I think it's at Lamson. It's home game for both teams. So
yeah, it's like one of those McKenzie Stadium specials.
Right.
Next game that we got is Lakes against Stadium. I mean, I wouldn't have had a problem probably picking this one really quick last week, but you know, now I'm really starting to think about it a little bit, and I think I'm going to still go Lakes in this one, but I don't know if you'd call it an upset or not, but Stadium might be, you know, ready to spoil the party for everybody in that 3A league there. So
yeah, totally. I feel the same way as far as picking this one. You know, I'm going back and looking at Stadium's schedule right now, and I think the reason I'm not taking them is they haven't put up more than 28 points, and Lakes really hasn't had a great start to the year either. They were River Ridge played them tough through the first half in week 2, but ultimately I think they probably just have more firepower. So I went Lakes, and so did Devin.
Good idea. Clean sweep there. Mount Tahoma against Lincoln. You know, Mount Tahoma and Lincoln are both kind of in that same boat here, and you know, I think for Lincoln, they're probably the more desperate team, but I think Mount Tahoma is a little bit more battle tested as well. I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say. I think this is a really, really good matchup, honestly. I don't know, man. I think it's tough. I think it's a coin flip. I'll just go Mount Tahoma. They're coming off the win.
Yeah, me too. Actually, we clean swept that one too, which is kind of surprising. But I think, you know, there's some legitimate concerns about whether or not Lincoln can score enough points to beat really good teams. Because if you're not going to score more than 17 so far this year, it's hard to win any game. Only scoring 17 unless you're going to shut out the other team virtually. So, yeah. Mount Tahoma in a sweep. Watch us. We'll all be wrong. It's happened before this year. That's for sure.
I mean, it only makes sense for us to all be wrong, to be honest with you.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's go to some 2A games here. Let's start with a non-league game. Prosser at Aberdeen. I think that a lot of this depends on which Aberdeen team shows up in this big game. Last year, Prosser really took it to them, but Aberdeen was minus their best player going into that one, thanks to an ejection where apparently a punch was thrown and not thrown at the same time. But the Mustangs, uh, they've already played a tough game on the road against Skyline, and they were able to put some points up against that good defense. Even though they gave up a lot more, I still think that Prosser will have enough firepower here. But if Aberdeen runs the ball and controls it like they're capable of, I think Aberdeen can win. But I have a problem here, Tyson. I just look at the Aberdeen game against Montesano, another good team, and Montesano just pretty much dominated that game. And I'm going to go Prosser on the road.
Yeah, me too. It's funny. We had Aiden on couple weeks ago, and he mentioned how what makes it tough for me is he mentioned how tough that they've been to beat at home. Had that win streak going, and then Montesano came in there and kind of tore that one up. But Prosser is a team that is definitely better than I think they're better than they were last year, and they frankly were probably a state-worthy team. Obviously had kind of late season slip ups, much like like a Linden Christian did or something, or Glacier Peak, and got stuck on the outside, but returned their quarterback, got some standout wide receivers. I think they just got a little bit more firepower where Aberdeen's going to have to ground and pound you to win.
Yeah, Devin's got Aberdeen in this one.
Yeah.
So split. Me and you 2-1. Bainbridge and Olympic. This one's at Olympic, and they're coming off of a loss. Bainbridge getting a lot of love in the RPI rankings. I went with Olympic in this one.
Yeah, frankly, I don't know too much about either team. They both like to score points, but Bainbridge hasn't gotten a test yet, so I'm taking Bainbridge. So is Devin.
Gotcha. Let's continue on down the road here in 2A. We got West Valley against Clarkson. Yeah, where's this game at here?
It is in. Let's see, it's at West Valley, Spokane.
Yeah, we'll go there. West Valley.
West Valley. Well, they don't have Rayshawn and they don't have Grady Walker. So on that note, I am going to take Clarkston.
Well, they can't have them. They don't play for them.
I know, that's what I mean. They're long gone, and that was their whole offense last season. And Clarkson's got Sage Lone Bear, who is a complete animal on the inside in the trenches, and he's not the only one that's on that Clarkson team's got is physical at the line of scrimmage. So
I love that name.
Yeah, I know I spelt it wrong on my players to watch thing I was doing. It's Lone Bear, like Lone, and I spelt it Loan, and he messaged me, "Hey, you spelled my name wrong." And I was like, "Oh man, you're not a lone bear like a lone shark. It's like the lone bear, It's a homage to, like we talked about before, some of the tribal history in this state. It's about as much so as it gets, and he's a beast, kid that's getting a lot of looks for sure.
Well, with a name like Sage Lone Bear, yeah, of course.
For sure.
Devin is going with West Valley.
Yep.
All right. Next game, Greater St. Helens League game, is Hudson's Bay at Ridgefield, and I think Ridgefield is going to be able to throw the ball a little bit more and can also possess the ball running it. I like Ridgefield in this one.
Yep, me too. Clean sweep. But I think it'll be a closer game than we thought at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
You've seen Hudson's Bay in person, though, so yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, they have the potential to. I ultimately feel like that. I feel like Ridgefield's front four is going to be able to hold its own against the rushing attack that Bay possesses. Bay does have two pretty good running backs in the Bauman brothers, Akil and Raphael, but Danny McDonald is a really good player on the defensive line, as you've seen on some film. So I think Ridgefield's going to be comfortable in that one. But hey, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
Enumclaw and Ording, big game here, buddy. Big chance for Ording to really establish themselves as a true contender, and they're at home here in this one. I think experience is going to play a big factor, though, in this one. So I'm going to go Enumclaw.
Yeah, me too. Ording has what it takes if they want to possess the ball on the ground and really keep the ball out of Enumclaw's hands. But ultimately, Ording's been making a living off of some really long runs, and I think you're going to have to hold the ball quite a while to beat this Enumclaw team, or you're not going to get it. So ultimately, clean sweep here as Devin also takes Enumclaw.
I'm thinking that this is a 2A, 1A matchup, but Sammamish and Sultan.
Yep, 2A, 1A, yep.
And
Sammamish sitting at 2-1 at Sultan. Sammamish at 2-1. We mentioned their running back earlier, Ty Webster. They also have a kid that plays defensive back for them by the name of Tito Simon. Forgot to mention him earlier, but 11 tackles last week and a strip fumble that resulted in a safety. So they've got some good players, I think, in that league, to play with, like, maybe not beat them, but they're going to give a team like Highline a challenge. That's why I put it on here. And Sultan's blown everybody out so far, but interesting cross classification game. I chose Sammamish. I'll start it off on that note. I think Ty Webster is going to be a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if he's able to be neutralized here, but I'm gonna go with Sammamish also. I think that's probably the right pick here. We'll see how it goes, but Sultan off to a good start here and a chance to probably really crack your rankings in top 10. I know you have them as a fringe team right now.
Yeah, they when I looked at their team, they were pretty deep. I was, nothing that I had on my radar, but I saw quite a few kids from that school that could play. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if they pull this one out.
Let's scoot back real quick here. Let's go back to 3A. We got Ferndale and Arlington. What a matchup this one is going to be. It's at Arlington. Huge opportunity. I chose Ferndale in this one, but if memory serves me right, I didn't do a ton of research again because my laptop. But I think Arlington won this matchup last year. No?
Yeah, I think they got them by 2, if I'm not mistaken. I'll look it up right now as we speak. But you're going Ferndale.
Yeah.
Devin's going Ferndale. I will be the latter, and I will choose Arlington in this game. Ferndale actually won that game 27-24 last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm still going Ferndale.
Yep. I'll take Arlington. They're scoring more points last year than they did most of the year, with the exception of their games against Getchell and I'm on Ferndale's schedule, so don't even scratch that. Can we edit that out?
Yeah, exactly.
All you people watching live, you didn't hear it. Yeah, ultimately, they look better this year than they did last year, so it'll be a good test for them. Like you said before, if they beat Ferndale, they'll definitely be inside that top 10.
2A game of the week, Linden and Cedro. I really don't know, man. I mean, at Cedro here in this one, it's put up or shut up time here for the Bears.
The Cubs.
The Cubs.
Hopefully they look like Bears, though.
They're still Bears, bro. Whatever, I don't care. But yeah, the Cubs.
Not Yogi and not Boo Boo. Hopefully, in this game.
Man. It really just comes down to, like, who's going to be able to win the fourth quarter in this one? Who's going to be fresher? Who's going to be deeper? Linden's always been that team, man. They've always been the fresher, deeper team in the fourth quarter when it matters. And this is just going to be an absolute grinder. I can't believe it, but I mean, I'm going to stick with my guns here. And when I said at the beginning of the season that Linden could potentially be on the outside looking in at the end of the year. So I'm not going to make a statement like that and then pick Linden. So I'm going Cedro.
You know, it's probably shocking to a lot of people, but we all choose Cedro. And I think ultimately it comes down to what quarterback runs the ball more effectively. And there's not many better at it than Karsten. So that's where both teams' bread and butter and their sweet spot is of where they frankly feel comfortable playing, I think, their best football. And, yeah, Cedro Woolley across the board.
Linden just replaced so many guys off of a good team last year. I find it hard to believe that Cedro is not going to be able to capitalize on this opportunity this week. That's all.
For sure, especially being at home.
I mean, if there's ever a time, this is it.
No, right? No doubt. Yep, no doubt.
Good transition to our 1A game of the week, man. Royal and Linden Christian. And Royal owes Linden Christian one. Last year, LC went to Royal and snapped a 36 or 37 game win streak, something like that. And I mean, if you look at the teams that Royals played so far and how they've just been absolutely dismantling them, like I think that they go and get some revenge personally. I think Royal wins this one against Linden Christian.
Yeah, me too. I think, you really got to limit Linden Christian in a couple of ways, and Royal has 6 or 7 guys they're going to get the ball to on offense, and they're just moving on at an even more well-oiled clip than last year. And frankly, the difference in last year's game was a Cade Eldridge punt return, and we all know who he is. Probably, I don't know the last time a 1A player from Washington State went to that school with the likes of USC. So I think, yeah, I got Royal. Devin's got Royal. Surprisingly, can we say that about Devin? That's a surprise. He chose Royal over Linden Christian. But here we are. He didn't choose Linden just a second ago, too. What's happening with him in Walker County?
This is bro. I wish he was here, right? Because this is called hedging your bets, bro. This is like me picking Oregon, right? It's like, do I really like want Oregon to win? No. But
for sure,
if they do win, I get the correct pick. If they lose, Oregon loses. So, it's the same concept here. It's like, do I think that they're gonna win? No. But if I'm wrong, am I gonna be upset? No.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a safe play right there, But I mean, I picked LC before the season started to win the state championship, and
then you got to stick by your pick. You just said that.
No, I don't. I don't have no, because they could lose this game and still win it. Last year, Royal lost to Linden Christian and won the state championship. I mean, there's a lot to learn from this matchup here, and LC is going to need this game. Their schedule's tough. They play Napavine too. Like, they're going to be better off for it. They're going to be like that Mount Baker team from last year. They may end up having a couple losses throughout the year, but they're going to be better off for having played the games. So, I mean, I'm going to go Royal in this matchup here, though. So, all right.
I agree. Just jabbing Devin's jaw a little on that one.
You're okay. Let's see what else we got here. We got Meridian and Friday Harbor here. Man, I don't know. Let's go Friday Harbor.
I like it. That's I think they're better than people thought they probably are. And anytime you got a 6'3", 240-pound running back to hand the ball to, it's going to be a long day for the other team to wrap that up consistently. So I chose Friday Harbor also, and Devin's got Meridian in this one. 3 more games.
Yeah, next one is good, man. Lakeside and Freeman. You know, I'm going Lakeside in this one, but man, look out for the Scotties.
Yeah, I chose Lakeside too. Last year I would. I mean, if we discussed that game, it would have been Freeman, just because mentioned before they had one of the best players in the state as far as 2A goes. But Freeman coming off that loss to
1A.
right, coming off the loss to Rogers, obviously they were playing up, but I'm still taking Lakeside. They're if Freeman scores over 14 points, I'll be very impressed.
Next game.
Devin had Lakeside too. Sorry.
Yep, you're good. Next game is Seton Catholic and Stevenson. This one's at Seton Catholic, and Matt Evans was on the stream and typed in that Stevenson is technically like an independent school, but they're playing a 2B football schedule. I think Seton Catholic is the play here regardless. I think Stevenson is going to be, very happy to have won the first 3 games of the season and playing with house money, so to speak. I think Seton Catholic has a real opportunity to, potentially get itself into that 2 spot in the Trico with Castle Rock missing its best player right now. Big opportunity this season for Seton Catholic, so I'm going with them.
Yeah, me too. If Stevenson plays close or even say wins this game, it's going to come off of 30 tackles from Hudson Holzhauer that we mentioned earlier. But I think Seton Catholic's pretty high powered, and they're a team that I would imagine is going to be here to stay, and as far as in my top 10 goes. So I went Seton Catholic. Devin is the opposition and took Stevenson in this one.
All right.
Say the smallest for last.
Yeah, Forks in Ilwaco, baby.
Yeah.
Let's go. This one's at Ilwaco. I like the Fishermen to bounce back here and give this one a good run, but I'm gonna ultimately go with Forks in the Road, baby.
Really? All right. Well, I'm gonna say that the Forks is gonna need the Cullen family's help in this one. I didn't know that off the top of my head. I just had to Google it if you understand the reference. But I'm taking Ilwaco. Ultimately, I'm using that Morton White pass correlation between Tuda Lake and Forks' matchup with them as a judgment of this game. And I'm going to say Ilwaco wins by 10 plus. Devin chose Ilwaco also. You get the Cullen family reference? Twilight. Nope. They're going to need all the vampires on their side for this one.
Never seen that one, but yeah, let's do it.
Filmed in Forks.
Forks, baby, let's go.
One of my classmates in high school was in the movies.
Yeah, so in the Pigskin profits for the Daily News, which by the way, thank you guys so much for lending us the name that we're using here for our show and our picks. Yeah, I went Forks in the paper as well, so I mean I'm not like dividing my picks.
I'm not hedging your bets.
No, I'm straight just going Forks here on this one, and I think Ilwaco can do some really nice things and can run the football, and we'll see how it plays out. But that's ultimately where I'm at. All right, this game does not count in our standings, right? But Lake Stevens and West Lynn. I mean, I obviously would like to see Lake Stevens win the game, right? I'm gonna make a prediction that West Lynn wins at 37-20.
That's a pretty fair prediction, I'd say. Frankly, if it's a close game, it's because Colton Matson's spinning around and making all sorts of plays, like he's done so far this year. If I was going to put a score on it, though, shoot. Yeah, 31-24, West Lynn. Although I really know nothing about their team, so, from a
They're the Lions.
Yeah. Twilight Forks High School was filmed in Kalama. At Kalama High School. Interesting. Auntie M just dropping knowledge on us all night. I love it. We're gonna have to, with these loyal people like James, Auntie M, Jake, these guys that have been commenting the last few weeks, or ladies for that matter. One day we might have to do like a caller segment. It'd be kind of fun. We're talking about Irish Mankey and Raider John. Was it last week? We can call this the Lake Stevens.
The Lee Corso hour.
Yeah.
Or the Lou
Actually,
hour.
I don't even know. Auntie M, who's your team you root for? Because it seems like you know a lot about all these different teams. She's talked about Woodinville. She's talked about Kalama. She's talked about O'Day and Eastside. Been to some Monroe games. I'm interested to know who her team is at this point. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's James.
I missed Master Chef tonight. Oh my god!
Thanks, James. We're gonna be on Wednesday. We're gonna be on Wednesday next week too. So you can always go back and watch these, but I know it's fun to interact with.
Oh my god! Like if you're really like saying like Gordon
Steelers
Ramsay or Pigskin Profits, oh my goodness, man, I gotta go with Gordon Ramsay. You donkey.
Yeah. Auntie M's a Steelers fan. What about high school football? I assume James is checking in from Lake Stevens.
Auntie M, come on, man.
Auntie M, it wasn't the last Super Bowl they were in, but they stole that one. Never gonna live that one down. Don't worry, we have it recorded.
we have a record too.
We do. But then he can't give us crap live, so that makes it perfect. We appreciate it. It's been more fun with all your guys' interaction the last couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah, we know that everything to do with Lake Stevens is being like overanalyzed. It's like I said, Tyson, I dare you, if they win this week, if Lake Stevens wins this week, I dare you to just come back and have them at number 2 and be like, I just think Graham Kapowski's win was just a little bit more impressive. So,
Yeah, I don't even remember who they're playing. Is it Puyallup?
Probably.
Let me see. I've got it on my top 10s. Let me open that Excel file again and
see. Hopefully, you won't be drinking the GK Kool-Aid.
Bellarmine Prep. See who they got. I don't know if Skyview beats Kamiak, they could be in trouble. Actually, Emerald Ridge beating Curtis. Who knows?
That's a tough one, man. Jeez, Bellarmine Prep, baby. I don't know. That'd be a really respectable win, I think, for Graham Kapowski. I think if they end up getting that one, I think it almost might be enough to keep them at number 1. So
Bellarmine did beat Bethel 3-0 in week 2.
See, look at that defense, baby, pitching a shutout.
Yep. Who knows? Notoriously a basketball school, that's for sure.
Altie's learning a lot from us, man. I hope not. We're like the I hate to use the reference, but we're like the Mike Tyson of role models here. We're like the Charles Barkley of role models. we're like the LeBron James of role models.
Hey, for some, that's very high standards.
No, I mean, LeBron's been reading the same page of the same book for the last 5 years. So I'm just saying, turn the page, change the book, at least put the bookmarker in a different spot. I mean, no, but seriously though, it's like we do appreciate all the comments and feedback and stuff. Like, we're gonna have like a good like a Skip Shannon debate or something like that. We need to figure out something that's like gonna drive a hot knife through our butter, baby. Like,
yeah.
Honestly, it's gonna. I'll probably go off next week if Tyson tries to come up with some sham ranking again. Like, where he's upset that Moses Lake is, on the outside looking in on one, side of the coin, and then he drops Woodland and Washougal, the same capacity. It's just like, what are you doing?
At least they're
do
both
that
At least they're both 2-1 teams. Not one's 3-0. The other's 2-1, and there hasn't even, anyways.
Here, watch this. Right, Orting's gonna beat Enumclaw. And then he's gonna have Enumclaw above Orting and be like, well, I mean, if they play again, this one was at Orting. I mean, I still feel that Enumclaw is a better team, and
hey,
what else is gonna happen? See,
take him to the woodshed, baby.
Yeah, what else can we do? Right? I mean, there's Emerald Ridge only lost by 1.
My Enumclaw bias probably stems from me calling Seamus Toohey Don Billingsley, and hence Friday Night Lights is my favorite football movie. So there you go. There's the bias directly.
James, we will gladly have Coach Tree on. If Coach Tree is available and wants to come on and talk Lake Stevens, I am 150,000% down with that. That is absolutely in the cards. Fuck, I'll DM him next week. I don't care. I mean, if he wants to come on, I don't know if he's following us. He's got to be following us for us to send him a DM and stuff. But
we could at least get J425, baby. Do you know who that is, James?
Start the fire.
Yeah,
he's got to be a brilliant coach. He's got a state championship and won it with a freshman QB. So I mean, absolutely. It's all about culture at this point. For Lake Stevens, honestly, for Lake Stevens, the biggest issue has just been getting over the hump and winning the first one. And once you get to that plateau, like it's all good from there. Like, and 4A is very winnable. Like the classification to me that seems like it's like the hardest to win is always 3A. Like I always struggle with like how many good teams are in 3A every single year.
Yeah, for sure. This year
with Curtis and Graham Kapowson and Emerald Ridge, like Lake Stevens better like be damn prepared. Woodinville, their defense pretty good. Skyview, their defense pretty good. Like it's exciting time, man. And we're already in week 4 now, and it's already kind of getting to that point where you're looking at all these teams and you're like, I can make a case for 5-6 teams in each class to maybe win a championship, except for 2B and 1A. Like honestly, 1A it's like
even 1A though. You get down into the Montessori Center.
Yeah, but bro, just as well as I do that like Royal is just like,
oh yeah,
it's a different animal.
Yeah, they definitely. It's a real system there. It doesn't matter who's putting on the shoulder pads. Wise Monroe High School 3A used to be 4A.
The last classification vote.
Yeah.
Or the last census, basically for classification. You're going to see teams that are fringe interchange. It's not uncommon.
I think they got more people in jail there than they do kids these days.
Well, that'll wrap things up on the show.
Not kids that are in jail, but the high school is right next door to the jail, for that matter. It's a beautiful high school, though. I've been there a few times.
Yeah, you got to watch out for them female guards and them conjugal visits producing all the good football players.
Yeah, for sure.
Inmates turning into athletes.
Yeah, longest yard, they're pulling them straight out. But they got a great quarterback there. Yeah, that Blake Springer, Paul Crew play same style of game right there. No. Monroe does not have convicts on their football team. That's not what we're saying. But either way.
Well, they damn well should.
Yeah, either way. Speaking of Monroe and Moses Lake, that's Coach Jay. Moses Lake is kind of who helped turn that Monroe team around back in 2015. Then they brought in Bumpus from receiver from WSU, ex-Seahawk, Seattle Sports 710er. Now he's at Roosevelt, and they've played some games pretty tough this year too. But either way, Little Monroe history there for you. One of the deadliest highways in this state. I'll say that for sure. On the way to Monroe.
Yeah, dude, you should come visit down here in our neck of the woods. Like we're like 5 miles from Oregon, where it crosses over like in this weird spot to where if you travel west, you hit Highway 30, which takes you out to Astoria and Seaside and stuff. Oh my God. Like Highway 30 has got to be like seriously like Oregon's deadliest highway. Like I can't imagine that there's a more deadly one.
Oh yeah.
It's like it's single lane and it's up and down and it's 55 miles per hour and there's always some slow dumb shit Oregonian driver who just had his gas pump for him going 5 below the speed limit, and as soon as it gets to the passing lane portion he stays on the left side and then backs up traffic, and then you're going to have some dumbass who's impatient trying to pass them, and it's going to be some head-on collision. Like, not good. Like, if you get into an accident there, like, you ain't, like, living. And plus, it's, like, right alongside the Columbia River. Like, literally over the summer, on the same exact day, 2 cars ended up in the Columbia River. One of them a semi. You know, so it's like, oh, yeah, dude, it's crazy. Like, you know. So, yeah, honorable mention, Highway 30 in Oregon for being a total shit show, a highway.
Yeah, for sure.
But
that about pretty much covered everything. If we didn't get to do a top 10 this week like we did last week, but if we are able to get some videos put together, we'll put those out on Twitter and do a little clip or something. But you know, main thing.
My fault.
No, not necessarily. I didn't find any. I didn't have any submitted, and you know, it's a fun thing. May not be able to do it every week. It kind of depends on involvement. You can find plenty of highlights out there to go strip, but I don't want to get into any sort of, you guys used my video for, so want to say
for free. Yeah,
right.
We used your video for free to promote you as a player.
Well, I don't mean players, but like some of these other, like there's some of these production companies that are like Northwest Ballers, or I think there's one called like Eyeball now. But are out there getting these highlight clips and stuff from the end zone, and then kids are resharing them. I had a lady send me one of her son the other day for nomination, but it had the Eyeball stamp right at the bottom. I was like, I can't use this. They might, you know, I don't know if that's a trademarked logo or what, but they might not like the fact that their logo is on our podcast. But they're out there. If you want to find them, you can.
All right. Well, let me say, I as an actual like owner and operator of N2 Media and our productions, I have a stamp, right? But I also load my videos up on a platform that allows them to be downloaded for free for the purpose of people being able to go back, dissect film, and, you know, like cut up a highlight if they want to. Like, I'm not going to get all legally be like, you can't use my video. It's like if I was super worried, right, as the person who created that content and stamped it, I would make it so you have to pay for it to get it, to access it. Like there'd be some exchange there, right? If I was truly concerned about it, you know. Right. Otherwise, I'm not going to put my shit out there. I just won't. Like, because at that point, like let's say that like a Derrick Henry or a Reggie Bush style highlight reel came about from the stuff that I did, like, and it had a million views, right? It's like I would learn my lesson at that point to never allow that to happen, instead of, you know, like getting mad at the person who performed. Because at the end of the day, the only reason that went viral was because of the athlete, not the person covering it.
Totally. Yeah, for sure. No doubt. James nominated Highway 20 going to Anacortes, and I can attest I've been on an accident on that highway leaving Anacortes, and reason it's dangerous. It's 2 lanes both ways, but you get those, you know, whether they're Oregonian transplants or Seattle transplants that like to go 45 and a 55 in the left lane, and especially during tulip traffic, it gets even worse.
Listen, I'm telling you right now, I-5 is going to be flooded with a bunch of like uppities from West Lynn driving up on our highway. Everybody better be careful, man. These guys have had their gas pumped for them their entire lives. It's going to be awful. So if they're making the trip up to Lake Stevens, like
avoid the trestle.
When you're standing in the concession stand lines and you have to listen to these people like try to have like intelligent conversations, they're going to be looking down at Lake Stevens like it's the poorhouse. I'm telling you right now, it's not good.
We aren't Watch Oregon out. Fans here. That's not allowed.
No, I just
I'll rep the Cougars.
Yeah, as somebody who used to work in the state of Oregon and had to drive behind them and all-star tournaments against Westland growing up in baseball. I got experience in this field. I used to go with a girl. By the way, that's old school for date. I used to go with a girl who went to a school in Lake Oswego, which is like one of the bigger rivals in that area for Westland. And oh my gosh, the Westland hatred like that they have for them and stuff. You hear all the stories. And it's like they used to make jokes like, "Oh, your parents bought you a BMW for your birthday. They obviously don't love you because I got a Mercedes."
Sounds like Bellevue High School.
I'm just being real. So I mean, it is what it is. But I'm pretty sure Westland, Oregon, is where Chael Sonnen grew up, the UFC fighter, and he always used to refer to it as the mean streets of Westland. And he was playing a character because he knew that there was legitimately like he's like nobody had it as hard as I did growing up. Like nobody knew what it was like to have a maid only come over and clean your house 4 days a week. Like all my friends growing up had a maid coming over every day of the week. Like
she had her own room.
They don't know what it was like growing up in the mean streets of Westland, Oregon, so.
That's funny. Yeah. James, the Cougars are not our enemy as Huskies, but if you ask them, they hate us more than anybody.
Oh, just so you know, I picked Oregon State to win that game against Washington State. Like the first of like the 9 games they're going to play next year is the only representatives of the Pac-2. But
poor guys.
I'm telling you right now, like Cougar fans have made it to where Washington is the enemy for us going to the Big Ten, when in fact the enemy is USC and UCLA, who started this nonsense. It's like, of course we're going to do what's best for us in terms of like what rivalry makes the most financial sense, because that's the only thing that's driving these locations and this realignment is financial motivations. There's literally nothing geographic about it that makes any sense whatsoever. So Cougar fans want to like pass that hate along to UW fans like for no reason. And by the way, Matt King, this will be proof if you actually watch our show ever. At least at the ending here, it's like you want to talk about one of the like more all-time like bad Husky hate takes that you made on Twitter the other day about like how beating Michigan State, is not impressive. It's like, what are they going to do? Like 715 yards of offense. They benched their starters pretty much for the entire second half against a Big Ten school that was good when they played. It's like that. See, that's the example right there that I'm talking about, Tyson. That's the blind Cougar hatred that they have for literally no reason against UW. Like, we don't want to drag you guys like we want to drag Oregon. It's right. To sit there and just like hate for literally no reason. It's pointless. It's like, we're not doing it to you. Like, we're sorry you didn't get the invite. You beat Wisconsin twice in a row. You proved you belong, right? We'd love to have you, but
I don't want to see that rivalry end, that's for sure. But blame it on the start of the Pac-12 network and what all the networks have done and how much of a, gigantic failure the Pac-12 network has been, not being able to be consistent on any particular service and having games that start at 8 and 9 o'clock. I mean, that's ultimately what led to the demise of the Pac-12 more than anything.
I mean, Matt's 100% right in the comment section here. I'll put it up for everybody to see real big. They hate us because they ain't us.
Yeah.
And the thing is too is like after we beat them by 25 or 30 every year, other than a couple years ago, like I mean we're not rubbing it in their face like we would rub in a 1-point win against Oregon.
No, not even close.
No, like if we beat Oregon by a single point, oh my God, that sustains Husky fans for at least 5 years. Like that's like, and then they like, oh, I guess you forgot that we won for an entire decade. It's like, no, but we don't want to talk about the past, right? Like they used to say to us, like we don't need to worry. We're not focused on the past. We're focused on the right now. And right now you lost by 1. You guys are a bunch of sorry Duck fans.
If you want to bring up our Tyrone Willingham era, let's talk about Paul Wolf for a minute.
Who?
Paul Wolf.
That Eastern Washington coach?
Yeah, that ran WSU into the ground virtually. I mean, while he was there anyways. Pretty poor show.
I got no ill will towards the Cougars as a team. Like I legitimately have no problem rooting for them, wife is an alumni, so it's like, hey, happy for the Cougars when they win, but I just don't understand like hating on the Huskies. It's like there should be a united front. I
understand hating on Seattle.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. But anyway,
like if I had to pick a town to live in, I'm still probably gonna pick Pullman, despite.
Yeah.
But
Pullman's awesome, by the way. Love Pullman. Like got Cougar country. Give me a Cyclone. Let's go.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had a lot of fun tonight. We were gonna cut it short, but I mean, starting off with a good 20-25 minute interview with Washougal coach Dave Hayjack. If you missed that, folks, go back and watch it. Dave's very well spoken. I should say Coach Hayjack to be more respectful. Love his vibes. Big red gum. Pete Carroll-ish. Love it. Good hair. And they're going to be taking on Mark Morris. We'll be streaming that game Friday, by the way, on YouTube and Facebook. So if you guys want to watch for free, you'll get a good look at the Washougal Panthers. And, maybe the Mark Morris Monarchs might surprise some people. So, we'll see how that game goes. But be sure to go back and check out that interview. Super thankful to have Coach Hayjack on earlier in the show. But, a lot of good performances. And, I think that the rankings that came out today just kind of lit a fire under everybody once again, is to, get out there on the field this Thursday, Friday, Saturday and get to work and prove it on the field and leave no doubt. So we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to it. I'll tell you what, though, this week's slate of games that we're doing, Tyson put these together. Great selections. The reason why I think is because ultimately I think it was super hard to pick some of them again. Like there's no real clear cut games that I'm feeling like super slam dunkish about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, even some of these higher ranked teams, talk to Emerald Ridge versus Curtis, or Royal versus Linden Christian, or Ording and Enumclaw, all three of them, teams that deservedly so, depending on what set list you look at of rankings, they're all at least worth mentioning in the rankings. But it'd be pretty exciting. And on the note of the RPI, I think the biggest takeaway is WIA will get it right, but they never get it right the first time.
Oh, well, the first 4 times. I mean,
it's happened a lot with a lot of different issues. Enough griping and stuff gets changed for sure, which that has nothing to do with the RPI, but overall.
Bro, looking at these games, if I had to look at these games this week, if I had to confidence pick rank these games, the only game that I'm even somewhat confident in is Seton Catholic Stevenson. That's it. Other than that, every other one of them, you're telling me to confidently rank Cedro over Linden, that'd be my one game. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I not interested in doing that. So yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a crazy slate of games that we picked this weekend, and I'm really looking forward to some of those dark horse games that we, don't get a chance to dissect and pick, because there's always a few that have big implications. But I mean, we got Meridian, Friday Harbor, we got Sultan and Sammamish. We're going off the beaten path and picking some tough games that aren't, O'Day against Bishop Blanchett or something like that. No offense, but just
Right.
but
Right. Yeah.
Anyway,
Monster, David versus Goliaths. Yeah. Let's
On
wrap
TM.
it up. On TM. You're great. Yeah.
Everybody, James, Matt,
Big House.
Jake,
Thanks for
everybody,
stopping by.
Big House, everybody. Appreciate everybody throwing in the comments and making us feel better about ourselves. And I look forward to revisiting all this again next week. And again, guys, next week is going to be Wednesday. Tyson's going to be leaving the state of Washington, I believe, right, to go do something. So
drive to Oakland, California on Friday.
Nice.
Yeah, first time.
So we'll be back again next Wednesday, and we'll talk about more rankings. We'll talk about these games and why I was more right than he was. So
got some catching up to do.
All right, everybody. Thanks again so much. Be sure to rewatch and share with friends and family, and leave comments in the comment section if you're not following our pages. Again, that's Tyson McCallum at Recruit Radar PNW, and I am Nick Sisson. It's at media_N2 on Twitter, and of course the YouTube channel and the Facebook channel. Appreciate everybody. Hell's Kitchen is Wednesday, says James. So I thought it was Master Chef. I mean, too much Gordon Ramsay in your diet, I think. You donkey! All right, guys. Thanks again. Tyson, have a good one, buddy. We'll revisit
Bye, everybody.
All right.